The air is warm and damp over the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands tonight, and we are moving slowly into their pale silvery shade. Settle in and let your breathing find the same unhurried rhythm as the water. Around you, the trunks of the paperbarks stand close together, their soft white bark peeling in thin layers, while the evening light rests on every wet leaf like a quiet hand. We are not going far quickly. We are letting Kakadu come toward us, one sound at a time, one reflection at a time, as the wetland opens in the low glow before night. The air smells of rain, warm mud, and leaves that have been drinking for months. Somewhere beyond the trees, water moves through grass so softly that you feel it more than hear it, a low breathing in the land. You can picture your feet near the edge of a shallow billabong, where the surface holds the last gold of the sky. The paperbark trunks lean over it, pale and narrow, and their reflections tremble when a small insect touches the water. Nothing hurries here. The whole Kakadu Paperbark Wetland seems to be exhaling after the heat of the day, cooling by degrees, loosening into dusk. I'll stay beside you as we drift through this place. We'll move the way water moves through the floodplain, spreading gently, finding the low ground, pausing among roots and sedges. Above us, the canopy is loose and open, and the first darker blue of night gathers between the branches. The world is still bright enough to see, but soft enough to stop asking anything from you. The paperbark trees are sometimes called melaleucas, and they belong to places that know both flood and dryness. Their trunks can stand with their feet in water for long seasons, then remain through months when the ground firms and cracks. You can feel that patience in them. Their bark is layered like old paper, soft to the eye, and it catches the dim light with a muted, chalky glow. Around the roots, the wetland holds small pools of warm, tea-colored water. Fallen leaves darken it. The smell is earthy and faintly sweet, like wet wood resting in shade. If you listen, there is a delicate clicking from insects, a low rustle from reeds, and the distant call of a bird folding itself into the evening. Each sound has space around it. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are shaped by water that comes and goes with the great monsoon rhythm of northern Australia. In the wet months, rain gathers over the country and pours across floodplains, filling billabongs, creeks, and low forests until the land becomes a shining, breathing mosaic. In the drier months, water withdraws slowly, leaving pools, damp hollows, and dark soil beneath the trees. We are entering that rhythm now, not as visitors in a hurry, but as listeners. The ground under you feels uneven and soft. It gives a little, then holds. A thin film of water reflects the pale trunks, the green sedges, and the broadening sky, so that every step seems to move through both land and mirror. You notice how the wetland does not separate things sharply. Tree, water, root, reflection, bird call, and air all seem to pass into one another. As we move farther from the open edge, the paperbarks gather more closely around us, and the light becomes green, silver, and brown. The leaves are narrow and slightly drooping, and when a breeze comes through, they do not roar or clap. They murmur. The sound is finer than surf and softer than rain, a dry whisper above the wet ground, carrying just enough movement to remind you the night is arriving. Here, the wetland is not empty quiet. It is full quiet. It has the quiet of hidden wings, folded petals, insects under bark, and fish moving beneath floating plants. You may not see each life clearly, but you can sense the whole place awake in a low and balanced way. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands have always known how to keep their secrets gently. At the waterline, lilies spread their rounded leaves across the surface. Some are bright green, some are shaded with bronze, and some hold small beads of water that reflect the fading sky. Their stems rise from mud below, where roots anchor in the warm, dark sediment. You can imagine that mud as a memory of seasons, holding fallen leaves, mineral grains, pollen, and the fine remains of plants that once leaned over the same water. This is how wetlands build themselves slowly. They catch what flows through them. They slow water down, letting silt settle, letting roots bind the soil, letting dead leaves become food for unseen life. Beneath the surface, bacteria and fungi work without drama, loosening and changing the old plant matter You do not need to see this work to feel its calm importance. A dragonfly passes near you, its wings clear as glass in the last light. It hovers, turns, and rests on a reed tip. For a moment, its body glows blue, then becomes only a fine dark line against the water. You breathe slowly, and the wetland seems to breathe with you. Warm air entering, cooler air leaving, the whole place settling into night. The paperbark forest has a particular softness at dusk. The trunks do not look heavy. They look almost weightless, as if the bark has been made from moonlight and ash. Some trunks are straight, while others bend and fork, shaped by years of water, wind, heat, and growth. When you place your attention on them, you can feel time becoming slow enough to touch. We keep moving inward, where the wet ground opens into a wider pool and the sky appears again between the trees. The surface is smooth except where tiny ripples widen and fade. Somewhere below, small fish turn through submerged stems, browsing, sheltering, and slipping between shadows. Their movements are brief, but the water keeps their traces for a moment, then smooths them away. Kakadu's wetlands are part of a vast seasonal landscape, where floodplains, stone country, savanna woodland, and tidal rivers all speak to each other through water. Here in the paperbark places, that conversation feels especially hushed. Rain from far away can become a pool at your feet. A channel can fill, overflow, rest and vanish again into damp grass. The land is always changing, but it changes slowly enough to comfort you. You may notice the smell deepening as evening cools the air. Wet bark has a clean woody scent. Mud carries the mineral sweetness of standing water. Flowering plants add faint notes that come and go as you pass them, never strong, never sharp. It is the kind of scent you breathe without trying, and it stays low in the body like warmth held under a blanket. Birds move through the wetland in small, careful ways. A heron may stand at the edge of a pool, still enough to resemble a pale branch. A jacana may step across floating leaves, its long toes spreading weight over the green pads. You watch them without needing them to perform. Their lives belong to the water's surface, and tonight we are only sharing the quiet edge. The science of this place is gentle when you let it unfold. Wetlands like these filter water, hold flood pulses, shelter young fish, feed birds, and store carbon in wet soils. They are not only scenery. They are working landscapes, but their work is nearly silent, carried out through roots, sediments, microbes, rainfall, sunlight, and time. You can rest inside that thought. Above the paperbarks, the sky has become a deeper blue. The first stars are not bright yet, but you can imagine them waiting behind the last wash of evening. The wetland below has its own dim shine. Water catches whatever light remains, the trunks glow faintly, and pale moths begin to move through the shadowed spaces. Everything seems to lower its voice. We follow the water along a narrow channel, where sedges brush lightly against your legs in the imagination of the walk. The channel is shallow, but it knows where it is going. It curves through the paperbarks, slips past raised roots, and spreads into another quiet pool. You can feel how the wetland is arranged by tiny differences in height, by just a little more hollow here, a little more firmness there. In the monsoon season, this same channel may be part of a broad sheet of water. The floodplain can open until trees stand in shining expanses, their trunks rising from reflections and their leaves trembling above a wide inland sea. Later, as the dry season returns, the water draws back and the pools become more defined. Life follows these changes with old familiarity, adjusting without hurry. There is comfort in a place that does not need to stay the same. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands teach change as something cyclical, not restless. Water arrives, water spreads, water clears, water sinks, and then the sky gathers itself for rain again. You can let that pattern settle into your own breathing, each inhale a quiet filling, each exhale a soft return. The trees around us hold faint markings where past water levels have risen along their trunks. Some roots twist at the surface, darkened by mud. Others disappear below the water, where they make little shelters for insects, tadpoles, fish, and the many small lives that belong to edges. Edges are important here. The wetland is made of them. You can look closely at one paperbark trunk and see its peeling layers. The outer strips are pale cream, grey and soft brown, curling away in thin sheets. Beneath them, the tree is living, drawing water upward, holding itself between flood and sun. The bark feels visually soft, almost like cloth, and the eye wants to rest on it. It is a quiet texture in a wide, wet world. As night comes lower, the reflections grow darker and more complete. The pool no longer shows the sky clearly, it shows a softened version of everything. Trunks become wavering columns, leaves become shadows. A bird crossing above becomes only a faint ripple of motion below. The wetland is still visible, but it asks less from sight now, and more from listening. The sounds arrange themselves around you. Insects pulse from the reeds. A distant waterbird calls once, then leaves a long silence behind it. Something small drops from a leaf into the pool with a delicate sound, and the rings spread outward until they touch the reflected trunks. You do not need to know what made the sound. It is enough to hear it fading. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands sit in a climate that moves between abundance and restraint. In the wet time, cloud towers build in the heat, rain falls in warm sheets, and water spreads across low country with a patient force. In the dry time, the sky clears, grass is pale, and permanent or lingering waters become gathering places. Both seasons belong to the same calm story. We are in the part of the story where everything feels held. The air is heavy, but not uncomfortable. The water is dark, but not empty. The trees are still, but not lifeless. You may feel, as you listen, that the wetland is teaching a slower kind of attention, one that does not search ahead, but stays with what is near. Near your shoulder, a leaf trembles and then rests. Near your feet, a bubble rises from the mud and opens quietly at the surface. Near the bank, a frog begins calling, its voice soft and rounded, answered by another farther away. The pattern is simple and ancient. Call, pause, answer, pause. Water, leaves, breath. We let ourselves drift with that pattern, deeper into the paperbark shade, where the wetland feels less like a place to cross and more like a place to enter slowly. The trunks continue on ahead, pale in the dimness, each one catching a little remaining light. The path is not really a path anymore. It is a suggestion made by water and open space. In Kakadu, these wetlands are connected to stone country that rises far away, to escarpments, sandy plains, and floodplains that have been shaped over immense spans of time. Rainfall runs from higher ground, gathers in creeks, and moves toward low wetlands like this one. The paperbarks stand where conditions suit them, where water lingers long enough and soil holds enough softness. Their presence tells you what the land remembers. The geology is quiet here because it is mostly hidden. You do not see towering cliffs in the paperbark wetland. You see what long weathering and seasonal flooding have made it ground level. Fine sediments, shallow basins, alluvial flats, and slow water. This landscape is not carved in one dramatic gesture. It is laid down, soaked, stirred, and settled again. That is why it feels so restful. The wetland has no need for sharp edges. It is built from gradualness. A leaf falls, softens, sinks, and becomes part of the dark bed. A flood arrives, spreads, drops its silt, and withdraws. A root grows into the new layer, holding it in place. Season after season, the world becomes deeper without seeming to move. You can imagine kneeling near the water, though we remain only in the gentleness of the narration. The surface smells warm and alive. Tiny insects skate over it, dimples following their feet. Under the floating leaves, stems descend into brown-green depth, and below them the mud waits, soft, dark, and full of slow transformations. Nothing is wasted here. The more you notice, the less separate you feel from the wetland's pace. Your thoughts begin to widen and slow, like ripples losing their edges. The trees do not hurry you, the water does not hurry you. Even the small lives moving around us seem guided by a rhythm older than urgency, older than clocks, older than any need to arrive. Ahead, the paperbarks thin for a while, and the channel opens into a lagoon-like space. The sky above it has gone violet at the edges, with a low band of fading warmth near the horizon. The water reflects that color in softened strips. Reeds stand in clusters, their tops darkening. The air between them is full of small wing beats and the delicate hum of evening insects. This open water is part of the same Kakadu Paperbark Wetland, though it feels more spacious now. The trees frame it rather than cover it. Along the margins, grasses bend over the edge, and mats of floating plants make sheltered places where young fish and invertebrates can feed. The lagoon is quiet, but it is also a nursery, a resting place, and a mirror. Wetlands often hold abundance in ways that do not feel crowded. Life here is layered. There are roots below, stems rising, leaves floating, insects moving, birds watching, and microorganisms changing the chemistry of water and mud. Each layer supports another. You can think of it as a soft woven fabric, with water as the thread that passes through everything. As the evening lowers, the temperature begins to ease. Warmth remains in the mud and trunks, but the air over the water cools first. You might feel that coolness on your face if you were sitting here quietly, watching the lagoon darken. It would be a subtle change, the kind you notice only when you are still enough to receive it. A water bird steps from one floating leaf to another. Its body is light, its movement careful, and each step barely troubles the surface. Nearby, a small fish breaks the water from below, making a brief silver point before vanishing again. The wetland closes over these movements tenderly. It keeps no spectacle, only traces. We let them be enough. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are beautiful, partly because they do not insist on being looked at in any single way. You can attend to the wide pool, or to one reed, or to one line of ants moving along a trunk above the water. Every scale is complete. The paperbarks at the far edge look almost white now. Their trunks stand in loose ranks, reflected in the lagoon as wavering vertical lines. Behind them, the darker woodland begins, and behind that, though unseen, the larger country continues into stone, savanna, river, and floodplain. You do not need to follow it all tonight. We remain here, where water has gathered and the trees have learned to stand with it. In the mud below the lagoon, oxygen may be low, and the chemistry changes in slow, hidden ways. Wet soils can hold plant matter for long periods because decay moves differently when water fills the spaces where air might be. This is one reason wetlands matter so deeply to the Earth's breathing. They keep carbon, cycle nutrients, and soften the movement of water through the land. There is something soothing about unseen work. While the surface rests, the wetland continues its quiet exchanges. Minerals dissolve. Roots take in what they need. Tiny organisms feed and transform. Leaves drift down. Sediment settles. The whole system keeps moving, but its movement is so fine and distributed that it becomes a kind of stillness. You can let your body understand that kind of stillness. It is not emptiness. It is balance. It is the feeling of many small things happening without strain, so quietly that they make one calm field of presence. The wetland holds itself this way through heat, rain, darkness, and return. The lagoon's edge curves gently away from us, and we follow it without needing a destination. The ground is firmer here, raised slightly above the wettest margin, and fallen paperbark leaves make a soft, pale litter under the trees. They release a faint dry scent when touched, mixing with the damp breath of the water. The contrast is delicate, dry leaf over wet earth, warm bark over cooling air. Every few steps, another pool appears between trunks. Some are no wider than a room. Some vanish into sedges. Some hold only black reflections and the pale line of a branch. In each one, the sky is repeated, changed, and made quieter. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are full of these small hidden mirrors, catching the evening piece by piece. You may feel your attention loosening now. That is all right. The wetland does not require sharp focus. If you drift away for a moment and return, the same soft elements are here. Paperbark, water, reed, mud, insect sound, warm air, cooling sky. Nothing has rushed ahead. We are moving at the pace of dusk. A faint breeze comes across the lagoon and finds the leaves. The sound travels through the paperbarks in layers, near leaves first, then farther leaves, then a wide whisper overhead. The water answers with a slight shiver. Reflections bend and straighten. The breeze passes, and the wetland settles again, as if it had turned in its sleep and become comfortable. The tree's ability to live in such change is part of their quiet grace. Paperbarks tolerate wet feet, seasonal flooding, and the long dry intervals that follow. Their roots and tissues are suited to these alternating conditions, and their seeds can find opportunity when the timing is right. They are not resisting the wetland's rhythm, they are participating in it. We can do the same. For these few minutes, we can stop resisting the slow descent into evening. We can let the mind become less like a road and more like a pool, holding what arrives, releasing what fades. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands make this easy, because every surface here seems to soften the world. Night is close now. The last color has thinned from the western sky, leaving a pale afterglow behind the tree line. The water darkens, and the paperbark trunks become the brightest things in the landscape. They seem to float in place, suspended between their roots and their reflections. You can almost imagine the whole forest drifting. As visibility fades, hearing becomes deeper. The insect chorus grows fuller, but it remains even, a woven sound rather than a sharp one. Frogs call from hidden pockets of water. Leaves brush lightly. Somewhere, a bird shifts on a branch, and the branch gives a faint creak. The wetland is speaking in small, rounded syllables. We pause at the edge of another pool, and the air feels close and kind. The smell of wet soil is stronger here. A few flowers, pale and nearly invisible in the dusk, release a light sweetness that comes and goes. The pool itself is still enough to show the first clear stars between dark leaves. Above and below, the same points of light appear. One sky held in two places. This is one of the gentle gifts of a wetland at night. It doubles the heavens without making them grand or distant. The stars are overhead, but they are also near your feet, trembling in water gathered among roots. You do not have to look up to feel the vastness. It has come down into the pool with you. Kakadu's Paperbark Wetlands belong to a much larger pattern of floodplain life, where water connects habitats across the year. Fish move when channels open. Birds arrive when food is abundant. Plants flower, seed, die back and return according to moisture and heat. Nothing here is isolated for long. Even still, pools are part of a wider pulse. That pulse is quiet tonight. It is held beneath the dark surface, inside stems, around roots, and in the bodies of sleeping birds. You can feel how the wetland gathers life without demanding noise from it. It is enough for things to be present. It is enough for water to hold them. We move a little farther, and the paperbarks close around the pool like a pale ring. Their bark catches the faint star glow and becomes softly visible again. Some strips hang loose, thin and curled. Others lie against the trunk in smooth, overlapping layers. The texture suggests age, weather, and renewal, all happening together without conflict. The ground here is scattered with old leaves and small pieces of bark. Some pieces are dry on top, damp underneath. If you lifted one, you might find tiny lives sheltering there, but we leave everything as it is. The wetland is not a thing to disturb. It is a place to accompany quietly, with attention light enough to leave no mark. Your breathing may now be slower than when we began. Mine is slower too, in the story we are sharing. The long evening has entered the body. Warmth, water, trees, and darkness have become one steady field, and the mind can rest there without needing to name every detail. Still, the details remain, patient and near. The pool narrows ahead into a channel so dark it looks like polished wood. Over it, paperbark branches lean together, making a low arch of leaves. We pass beneath them slowly, and the air feels cooler in the enclosed shade. The sounds outside the arch become softened, as though the trees have folded a thin blanket over the night. This is not a tunnel, exactly. It is only a place where growth has leaned toward water. The branches follow light, the roots follow moisture, and the channel follows the low ground. Together, they make a passage that seems intentional. Though it has been shaped by ordinary needs over many seasons, that is often how beauty forms in natural places. In the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, ordinary needs become landscape. A tree needs water and light. A frog needs a damp calling place. A bird needs shelter and food. A seed needs the right soil and timing. A flood needs somewhere to spread. Over time, all these needs overlap and settle into this calm, layered world. The channel carries us into deeper shade, where the sky is now only a narrow darkness above the leaves. The water below shows no color, only occasional glints when a ripple catches starlight. You can feel the edges more than see them. Reeds brush the bank, roots thicken near the surface. The air smells close, green, and full of night moisture. A moth passes near the pale bark, appearing and disappearing as it crosses lighter and darker spaces. Its wings are soft, almost silent. It does not seem lost. It follows scents and air currents we cannot read, moving through the wetland by another kind of map. You watch for a moment, then let it vanish into the leaves. There is no need to keep everything in view. As darkness deepens, the wetland teaches trust in partial knowledge. You know the pool is there by smell and sound. You know the trees are there by their pale trunks. You know life continues by the gentle chorus around you. The unseen becomes peaceful because it is held by pattern. We rest in that pattern while the night settles fully over the paperbark wetlands of Kakadu. Water lies in dark hollows. Leaves hang still, roots drink slowly. Mud keeps its long memory. The air, warm and damp, rests against your skin like a soft cloth. Far above, the stars continue without hurry, and below them, the wetland keeps breathing. And as that breathing continues around you, the night feels less like darkness arriving and more like water gathering softly in the mind. The trees are still there, pale and patient, holding the edges of the pools with roots that have known many seasons. You can imagine the damp bark cooling beneath the night air, while the leaves above keep the last stored warmth of the day. We remain in the same gentle country, moving only as attention moves, slowly from one quiet surface to another. The Kakadu paperbark wetlands have a way of making distance feel unimportant. A pool a few steps away can seem as deep as a lake once the stars settle into it and the bank disappears. You might see only a silver trunk, a dark ripple, and the dim line of sedges leaning toward the water. That is enough. The wetland does not need wide views to feel vast, because each small place contains the rhythm of the whole. Beneath the water, the roots make a soft, hidden architecture. Some are thick and dark, holding the bank together through flood and drying, while finer roots branch into the mud like delicate threads. Around them, fallen leaves soften, microorganisms feed, and the shallow water carries faint changes in temperature and chemistry. You do not see this from the surface, but you can feel its steadiness, as if the whole wetland is working in its sleep. We drift beside the channel, where the water is almost still, and the night sounds come closer because the eye has less to hold. A frog calls from somewhere low and wet. Then another answers from a different pocket of darkness. The calls are not urgent. They are rounded, patient notes, set into the insect hum like beads dropped gently into cloth. You listen, and your breathing finds the spaces between them. The air near the water is heavy with green scent. It smells of wet bark, soft mud, crushed grass, and the faint sweetness of flowering plants hidden among the reeds. Every now and then, a cooler thread of air slips along the channel, touching your face and then disappearing into the paperbark shade. We follow that coolness for a while, letting it guide us deeper into the quiet interior of the wetland. Here, the ground rises just enough to hold a loose stand of trees above the darkest water. Their trunks are close but not crowded, and the pale bark makes narrow columns in the night. You can sense the open spaces between them, where floodwater has passed and where dry season air will one day move more freely. In Kakadu, this balance is never fixed, and the paperbark wetlands live by that graceful change. During the wetter months, the same place may be filled from tree to tree with shallow water that catches cloud and lightning and warm rain. During the drier months, the water may gather itself into deeper pools, leaving damp stains and leaf litter where fish once passed. We are listening to the memory of both seasons at once. The mud remembers flooding, and the bark remembers sun, and the roots hold both without choosing. A small movement crosses the pool beside us, too faint to identify clearly, and then the surface smooths again. Perhaps it was a fish rising for an insect, or a beetle touching down, or a floating leaf turning over in a small current. The exact cause matters less than the way the water receives it. A ring widens, touches another ring, and then becomes part of the general stillness. You can let your thoughts behave the same way. One thought rises, then softens. Another appears, touches it, and fades. The wetland gives you a model of rest that is not forced, not empty, and not perfectly silent, but gently continuous. Everything moves a little, then returns. Everything speaks softly, then leaves room for what comes next. As we move along the bank, the paperbark leaves overhead show only their edges against the star-filled gaps. They are narrow, slightly curved, and arranged in a way that lets air move through them without breaking the calm. When a breeze passes, the leaves make a sound like distant rain, although the sky above us is clear. It is a remembered rain, held in the shape of the trees. The wetland's water often carries the color of tea, stained by tannins from leaves and bark. In daylight, that color can be amber, brown, or dark green, depending on depth and sky. At night, it becomes a polished darkness, and you know its color only by memory. We stay close to it anyway, because the scent and coolness tell us where the water lies. In the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, the boundary between water and land shifts with the season, and every creature here reads that shifting in its own way. Fish follow channels when they open. Birds follow fish. Seeds, insects, and shallow feeding places. Frogs wait for dampness. Plants wait for light, depth, warmth, and exposure. You can feel how carefully life has learned to listen here. We pass a cluster of sedges standing waist-high in the shallows, their stems close together and their tips bending under fine drops of moisture. The drops catch the smallest light, not enough to shine brightly, just enough to bead and glimmer. If your hand moved near them, they would wet your skin. We do not disturb them, we simply notice the way they gather night from the air. The soil beneath these sedges is soft and oxygen-poor, and that softness changes how roots grow and how nutrients move. Wetland plants often have special tissues that carry air down into places where ordinary roots might struggle. It is a quiet adaptation hidden inside stems and leaves. The plant does not announce it, it just stands there in dark water, doing what it has learned to do. There is peace in that kind of knowing. The paperbarks do not need to escape the flood, and the sedges do not need dry ground to be themselves. They belong to conditions that might seem difficult from far away, but from within the wetland they are simply the shape of home. You can rest inside that idea. Home can be a place of change, if the rhythm is known. The channel bends now, and we follow it into a space where the trees open again, revealing a broader patch of sky. Stars lie scattered above the wetland, and their reflections tremble in the dark water below. The two skies are not identical. The upper one is steady, while the lower one breathes with insects, fish, and faint currents. Together they make the night feel deep in both directions. A nightbird calls once from the far side of the pool. Its voice moves over the water, low and spaced, then disappears among the trunks. You hear the silence after it as clearly as the call itself. The silence is not a gap. It is the wetland receiving the sound, folding it into leaves, bark, mud, and water, until it belongs to everything around us. We stay at the pool's edge long enough for the dark to become familiar. At first, you may have thought you could see very little, but now shapes return in softer ways. A leaning trunk becomes visible. A reed bed appears as a dark fringe. The smooth water shows a faint path of starlight. Your eyes adjust, and so does your mind. This adjustment is one of the wetland's gentlest lessons. Not everything needs to brighten for you to understand it. Sometimes you become quieter, and the world reveals itself at the level of quietness you've reached. In the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, darkness does not erase the landscape. It changes the way you meet it. The paperbark trees closest to us carry scars and textures from older seasons. Some bark is peeled back in soft curls, and some lies flat in layered sheets. A trunk may show gray, cream, tan, and pale rust in the same patch, all muted by night. You can imagine running your fingers near the surface, feeling dry flakes above and cooler dampness underneath. though we leave the trees untouched. These layers have practical uses for the tree, protecting living tissue and renewing the outer surface as weather and insects take their share. Yet they also give the forest its particular dreamlike brightness, especially when moonlight or twilight catches them. The bark seems both fragile and persistent. It loosens, sheds, and reforms, while the tree remains rooted through rain and heat. We can let that be enough of a thought for now. There is no need to turn it into a lesson too quickly. A tree can be a tree, pale in the dark, with bark like folded paper and roots in wet soil. You can simply see it, breathe with it, and feel the night becoming wider around its stillness. Farther along the pool, floating leaves drift near the bank. Some are round and some are narrow, depending on the plant, and all of them make little resting places for moisture and tiny lives. A small insect crosses one leaf, pauses, and continues to another. The movement is so slight that you would miss it if you were rushing. Here we are not rushing, so the smallest crossing becomes visible. Wetlands reward this kind of slow attention. They are full of small thresholds, where air meets water, water meets mud, leaf meets light, and root meets sediment. Much of the life gathers at these thresholds because conditions change there, and change creates possibility. You can sense that richness without needing to count it. The edge itself feels alive. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are part of a landscape that has been cared for and known for a very long time. The living systems here are not separate from deep human knowledge, though tonight we remain with the natural hush of water, trees, and night air. You can feel that the place has names, seasons, and meanings beyond what we can hold in a single passage. We move respectfully, keeping our attention soft. A warm breath of air rises from the mud as the ground releases the day's heat. It carries the scent of wet leaves and the faint mineral smell of shallow water. Above it, the cooler night continues to settle, layer by layer, until the air around you feels gently mixed. Your body may recognize this as a kind of lullaby, warmth below and coolness above, the same way blankets and open air can meet in sleep. We follow a narrow strip of firmer ground between two pools. On either side, the water is dark and close, and the paperbarks stand reflected in broken lines. The path is natural, made by slight elevation and plant growth rather than by any hard edge. You can imagine each step placed carefully, not out of fear, but out of tenderness for the soft ground and the many small lives it holds. The wetland's surface can look simple from a distance, but up close it becomes a fine pattern of textures. Smooth water lies beside floating leaves. Mud holds small prints and fallen bark. Grass blades cross one another in pale green strokes. A trunk rises, twists, and disappears into leaves. We let the eye move slowly across these textures, as if reading a page written by rain. Every seasonal flood rewrites that page. It moves seeds, lifts fallen leaves, spreads nutrients, and connects pools that may later stand alone. When the water withdraws, it leaves traces in soil and plant growth, and the next wet season begins from those traces. The paperbark wetlands of Kakadu are not a finished picture. They are a recurring sentence, spoken by weather and land. You might feel that recurrence inside your own rest. Breath returns. Thought returns. After sound. The body sinks a little deeper into stillness, then deeper again, without needing a final point. We keep moving through the wetland in that same way, not toward an ending, only toward a softer level of attention. A cluster of paperbark flowers hangs above the channel, pale and brush-like, barely visible in the night. During brighter hours, these flowers may draw insects and birds with nectar, linking the trees to the wider food web. Now, they are mostly scent and shape, a faint softness against darker leaves. You notice them as a suggestion rather than a display. The blossoms remind us that wetland trees are not only structures in the landscape, they feed, shelter, shade, and anchor. Their branches hold nests and insects. Their bark shelters small creatures. Their flowers offer nectar. Their fallen leaves enter the water and become part of the food chain below. A paperbark is a living meeting place, even when it stands quietly alone. We pause beneath it, and the pool beside us reflects the flowered branch as a blurred, pale cloud. The reflection moves with tiny ripples, It is less detailed than the branch above, but somehow more restful. You do not have to see everything clearly for it to be beautiful. Sometimes the softened version is what lets the mind release its grip. The night is deeper now, but it is not heavy. It rests lightly over the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, touching the tops of the trees, the open pools, the channels, and the low mats of vegetation. The darkness gathers every color into itself, leaving only tone, texture, and quiet motion. We move inside that gathering, and nothing asks us to leave it. A long time ago, the sediments beneath this wetland began as particles carried by water, wind, and weathering rock. Grain by grain, they arrived in low places, settled, mixed with organic matter, and became the soft ground that now holds these roots. This is geology at the pace of sleep. No sharp fracture, no sudden monument, just land lowering, water lingering, and matter coming to rest. You can feel the depth of that slowness beneath the shallow pools. The water at the surface may be only a little deep in places, but the story beneath it is old and layered. Each season leaves something. Each flood takes something. Each dry spell reveals something. Over many years, the wetland becomes both memory and motion. We move from the firmer strip back toward a darker channel, and the sound of frogs grows fuller. Their calls overlap, but they do not feel crowded. Some are soft clicks, some are low pulses, and some seem to rise from under the grass itself. You hear them around you rather than in front of you. The wetland has become a room with no walls. In that open room, your sense of direction may loosen. The paperbarks repeat their pale trunks, pools appear and disappear, reflections make the ground seem doubled. Yet, there is no need to be oriented in a practical way, because this is a slow listening journey, and I am here with you in the voice of it. We simply follow the quiet where it leads. The channel widens into a shallow basin, rimmed with reeds and scattered young paperbarks. These younger trees have slimmer trunks, and their bark looks smoother, though still pale in the starlight. They stand in water that may nourish them now and test them later. If they endure the changing seasons, they will add their own shade to the wetland and hold more soil around their roots. Growth here is not separate from disturbance. Flood, drying, heat, and renewal are all part of the same pattern. A seedling that survives does so by fitting into the rhythm rather than avoiding it. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are calm tonight, but their calm includes a long history of seasonal force softened by time. We feel only the restful surface of that history. A faint splash comes from the far reeds, and then a few small ripples travel outward. They reach the reflected stars and bend them briefly. The stars do not disappear. They tremble and return. You can take that image into your own body, letting any small disturbance pass through without needing to harden around it. A ripple can move across rest and still leave rest behind. The basin water smells slightly different from the channel, warmer and more enclosed. It holds more decaying leaves, more submerged stems, and a richer earthy sweetness. This is the scent of wetland productivity, of plant matter becoming food in another form. It is not a sharp smell. It is deep, rounded, and low, the scent of things becoming part of one another. Insects gather where moisture and plant life are abundant, and they feed many others in turn. Dragonfly larvae live below the surface before taking to the air. Mosquitoes, midges, beetles, and countless small forms move through water and sky. Birds, fish, frogs, and other wetland lives depend on this abundance. You do not need to dwell on each one. It is enough to sense the web humming gently. We stand with that hum, and the night seems to thicken pleasantly around it. The paperbark leaves stir again, and a few drops fall from somewhere above into the basin. Perhaps they were held from earlier moisture, caught along a leaf or branch. They strike the surface one after another, slowly, each drop making a small sound, each sound dissolving into the larger hush. There is a softness in the way water completes every gesture. A drop falls, and the pool receives it. A leaf loosens, and the mud receives it. A call sounds, and the trees receive it. You may feel yourself being received in the same quiet way by the room around you, by the bed beneath you, by the slow narration passing like water through the dark. The basin narrows at its far end, where a cluster of roots rises above the surface. They twist together in low curves, some wet and dark, some pale where bark or old wood catches the light. Around them, small bubbles cling to submerged edges. These are the kinds of details the wetland offers when we move slowly enough, not grand scenes, but intimate signs of life and matter touching. In daylight, you might see more color here: green algae films, brown water, pale bark, yellowing leaves, and the blue flash of insects. At night, color rests and texture becomes more important. The smoothness of water, the roughness of bark, the fine blade of sedge, and the soft give of mud all become part of how we imagine the place. The senses share the work. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are sometimes flooded, sometimes drying, sometimes blooming, and sometimes holding still pools under a wide sky. Tonight, we are with the stillness, but the other phases remain folded inside it. You can feel them as possibilities. Rain could return, heat could rise, water could spread, flowers could open, birds could gather, and the wetland would keep its calm continuity through each change. We keep descending, not downward through water, but deeper into the quiet layers of the place. The first layer was evening light on bark. The next was reflection. Then came sound, scent, darkness, and the hidden work beneath the surface. Now we are in the layer where time itself feels slow, where the wetland seems older than the thoughts we bring to it. A large tree leans over the channel ahead, its trunk angled as if listening to the water below. Its bark is pale on the upper side and dark near the base, where moisture has touched it again and again. Roots spread into the bank, gripping the soft ground. The tree's reflection makes a second leaning shape beneath it, and for a while, above and below appear equally real. You can rest your attention there, on the doubled tree. One tree grows in air, one tree trembles in water. The first is rooted in soil, and the second is rooted in reflection. When a ripple passes, the reflected tree loosens into wavering strips, then gathers itself again. It is a quiet reminder that form can change without being lost. This is part of the wetland's comfort. It shows you transformation without drama. Clear water becomes dark water. Leaves become soil. Pool becomes vapor. Bark loosens and renews. A reflection breaks and returns. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands do not resist these passages. They are made from them. We pass beneath the leaning tree, and the air under it feels cooler. The canopy lowers close enough to make the night more intimate, and for a few moments the world is mostly trunk, leaf, and water. You might hear your own breath more clearly here. You might feel your shoulders soften. The wetland seems to narrow itself around us in a kind, protective way. Beyond the tree, the channel opens to a patch of low grasses where the water is shallower. The mud here may warm quickly in daylight and cool gradually at night, influencing where small creatures feed and rest. Temperature changes in wetlands can be subtle, but they matter. Warm shallows, cooler channels, shaded pools, and exposed edges all create different small habitats within the larger calm. You can imagine these differences as quiet rooms in the same house. One room is grassy and shallow, one is dark and rooted, one is open to stars. One is shaded by paperbark leaves. Life moves between them according to need, time, season, and instinct. We move between them too, but only in the soft way of listening. The wet grass gives off a fresh scent when the breeze comes across it. It mixes with the heavier mud smell and the dry, papery scent of the bark. Together, these scents make the air feel layered, like the landscape itself. Each breath brings a little more of one than another. You do not have to separate them. You can let them arrive as one deep wetland breath. A faint haze lies above the shallow grasses. Not a fog exactly, but a softness in the warm night air. It blurs the far trunks and makes the stars seem slightly further away. The water below holds its own small darkness. The whole scene feels suspended, as if the wetland has paused between the day's stored heat and the cooler hours before dawn. In this pause, the paperbarks continue their slow exchanges. Leaves release moisture, roots take in water, flowers, bark, and leaf litter feed other lives in ways too small to hear. The land does not sleep in the way we sleep, but it has resting phases, quieter hours when growth and decay proceed without the brightness of day. We have entered one of those hours. You may notice the rhythm of the narration becoming more like the rhythm of the wetland. A thought moves forward, then widens. A detail appears, then fades into the larger scene. We return again to water, trees, scent, and sound, because that is what the place returns to. Sleep does not need constant novelty. It needs trustworthy repetition, with enough change to keep the mind gently held. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands offer that repetition naturally. Pale trunks, dark water, green edges, and warm air appear again and again, each time slightly altered by angle, season, light, and attention. You can hear the same frog call many times and still find it different. You can look at another pool and feel you have seen it before, though its reflections are entirely its own. We continue along this shallow margin, where the grasses brush the water and the water presses quietly into the grass. The line between them is not clean. Some blades stand in mud, some in water, some in both, and some have fallen to make small bridges for insects. Edges here are soft, and the softness is part of the wetland's strength. Soft edges slow things down. They slow water, catch sediment, shelter young life, and make room for many small processes to happen at once. A hard edge would rush the flow and separate one place from another. The wetland's gradual edges allow mingling. You can feel that mingling in the air itself, where scent, warmth, sound, and darkness pass through each other without boundary. As we move, the moon may begin to rise beyond the trees, or perhaps it remains hidden tonight, leaving the stars to do the gentler work. Either way, the paperbark trunks keep their pale presence. They do not shine brightly, but they hold just enough light to guide the eye. In the quiet of Kakadu, even a small brightness can feel companionable. A pale trunk appears ahead, with a hollow near its base. The hollow is dark, edged by rough bark, and partly hidden by grass. Such hollows can shelter small animals, insects, or simply cooler air, depending on the season and the tree's condition. We do not peer into it. We let it remain a dark pocket in the landscape, one more private space held by the wetland. Privacy is part of the peace here. So much of the wetland's life happens out of sight, beneath leaves, inside mud, under bark, within water, and among reeds. You are not excluded by that hiddenness. You are soothed by it. The world does not need to reveal every detail to be trustworthy. Some things can stay folded away. The channel grows darker as we pass under a denser canopy. The leaves above catch the breeze in a slow, uneven shimmer, and the sound becomes a little fuller, like cloth being moved gently by careful hands. Water touches the bank with small, soft sounds. Insects continue their steady chorus. Your mind may now drift between the words and the wetland they are carrying. That drifting is welcome. The script is not asking you to hold every image. If one sentence slips by, the next will still be water, bark, and quiet. If one detail fades, another will arrive softly in its place. We are still in the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, still moving with the same unhurried attention, still letting the night deepen at its own pace. The wetland floor beneath the water is uneven, with small hollows, raised root mats, submerged stems, and places where sediment has gathered. These tiny variations influence the way water warms, cools, and moves. They decide where leaves collect, where insects breed, where fish shelter, and where plants take hold. A landscape can be shaped by differences so small they would barely lift your hand. You can feel the gentleness of that scale. Not every force has to be large to matter. A shallow depression can hold a pool. A fallen branch can slow floating leaves. A root can catch sediment. A sedge clump can shelter a frog. Over time, these small forms help arrange the larger wetland quietly and continuously. We come to a place where fallen paperbark leaves have gathered against a root, making a pale raft along the bank. Some leaves are fresh enough to keep their shape, others have softened, darkened, and begun to sink. The water around them is stained a deeper brown. You can smell the richness there, the beginning of decay, which in a wetland is not an ending but a return. Decay sounds like a harsh word only when it is separated from renewal. Here, it is soft, slow, and necessary. Leaves become nutrients, wood becomes shelter. Old stems become food for small organisms, which become food for larger ones. The wetland is always receiving its own past and making it useful again. You can rest in that without needing to think further. A small breeze lifts one loose strip of bark on a nearby trunk. It moves slightly, then settles back against the tree. That tiny motion draws your eye because everything else is so calm. The bark looks delicate, yet it has endured sun, rain, insects, wind, and flood. Fragility and endurance are not opposites here, they are woven together. The paperbark's layered surface can shed, protect, insulate, and renew, while also giving the tree its pale, ghostly beauty at night. In the Kakadu paperbark wetlands, function and beauty often seem to arrive in the same quiet form. A reed filters water and makes a pleasing line. A root holds soil and creates shelter. A pool stores life and reflects the sky. We move beyond the leaf raft, following the channel as it curves toward a wider floodplain opening. The trees begin to space themselves again, and the air feels broader. You can sense a large open wetland nearby, even before you see it, because the sound changes. The insect chorus seems wider, and the breeze has more room to travel across water and grass. Then the view opens into a broad, shallow expanse. The water lies low and dark under the night, broken by reed beds, floating leaves, and the pale trunks of paperbarks along the margins. The sky is much larger here. Stars stretch from one side of the wetland to the other, and their reflections gather in broken patches wherever the surface is clear. This wider space reminds you that the small pools and channels all belong to something more expansive. The Kakadu paperbark wetlands are not just isolated pockets of water among trees. They are part of a breathing floodplain system, a landscape that can open wide under rain and then draw itself back into channels, lagoons, and shaded hollows. Tonight, we are seeing one of its open breaths. The broad water holes sound differently. Calls travel farther. A frog near the bank may seem answered from across the dark expanse. Leaves rustle at the edges, while the center remains smooth and almost soundless. You can imagine sitting beside this open water for a long time, watching the stars shift slowly, feeling the warmth leave the day grain by grain. A bird moves somewhere beyond the reeds, its wings making a soft, brief rush. It settles again, and the sound disappears. The wetland returns to its layered hush. We do not follow the bird. We let it have its night. Our path remains with the water's edge, where open floodplain and paperbark shade meet in a long, soft curve. This meeting place is especially rich because it holds both shelter and openness. Birds can move from trees to water. Insects can rise from reeds into open air. Fish can shelter among submerged stems near the margin. Plants can root where light reaches them and moisture remains. You can feel the generosity of the edge without needing to analyze it too much. The open water reflects a few brighter stars in wavering lines. Each line stretches and narrows as tiny movements pass across the surface. If a faint current moves through, it is too slow to see directly, but the reflections reveal it. This is another way the wetland speaks, not by showing the movement itself, but by showing what movement does to light. You can let that thought loosen into feeling. The mind, too, may not see every slow current within itself, but it can notice the way attention changes, the way breath deepens, the way the body grows heavier and calmer. The wetland gives us images for these inner shifts without naming them too sharply. It keeps everything soft. Along the bank, the mud is marked by tiny holes and impressions. Some may have been made by insects, some by roots, some by the slow release of gas from the sediment. At night, they are only small dark points in the softer dark. During the day, they would be clearer, but tonight they remain quiet signs of hidden movement below the surface. Wetland mud is alive with process. It stores water, holds organic matter, changes nutrients, and shelters organisms too small to see easily. Its softness is not emptiness, it is capacity. You might think of it as the wetland's memory, recording seasons through layers of sediment and leaves, then offering that memory back as food, structure, and moisture. We stand near that memory now, breathing the damp air rising from it. The bank is warm near the ground, cooler near the face. The air tastes faintly mineral, faintly green. The paperbarks behind us make a pale wall of trunks, while the open water ahead stretches into darkness. The body understands this arrangement as shelter and space at the same time. The moon, if it has risen, is still low enough to silver only the highest leaves. If it has not, the stars remain clear and small. Either way, the wetland does not need much light. Its forms are simple enough to be felt in darkness. Vertical trunk, horizontal water, bending reed, floating leaf, breathing air. We keep returning to these forms because they are restful. A slow ripple reaches the bank and folds against the mud. Another follows. They may come from a small movement far out in the open water, or from the breeze crossing the surface at an angle. By the time they reach us, they are gentle almost without origin. You can listen to them as you would listen to distant breathing in a quiet room. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands hold water that has traveled through a large living landscape before arriving here. It may have fallen as rain on stone, run through grasses, gathered in creeks, crossed floodplains, and slowed among roots. By the time it rests beside us, it has touched many surfaces. It carries traces fine particles, dissolved minerals, plant tannins, and the temperature of the places it has passed. There is tenderness in thinking of water this way. It is never only itself. It is a traveler, a carrier, a mirror, and a home. In the wetland, water stops traveling quickly and becomes available to life, reflection, cooling, growth, and rest. We are also stopping here, in our own way, becoming available to quiet. Across the open expanse, a line of paperbarks marks the far margin, their trunks faint and nearly blended with the night. Between us and them, reed beds form dark islands. The water around those islands is still, with occasional glints where a ripple turns toward the sky. The whole scene feels low and wide, as if the earth has opened a shallow palm to hold the night. We follow the curve of that palm, staying near the trees. The ground under the paperbarks is littered with strips of bark and dry leaves, and each step in imagination is muffled. The air is close to the skin. A warm breeze carries the wet scent of the floodplain toward us, then passes into the trees and becomes a leaf whisper. Nothing breaks the mood. The more time we spend here, the more the wetland seems to be made of transitions rather than objects. Water becomes mud at the bank. Mud becomes root. Root becomes trunk. Trunk becomes leaf. Leaf becomes litter. Litter becomes sediment. Sediment holds water again. This circular softness is one reason the place feels so complete. You do not need to follow the circle with effort. You can let it turn in the background of the mind. The words will keep moving, the water will keep darkening, the trees will keep their pale watch, and the night will keep settling around Kakadu's Paperbark Wetlands with a steadiness that asks nothing sudden from you. A patch of open mud appears where the water has drawn back a little from the bank. It shines faintly, smooth and dark, and it holds the imprint of fallen leaves. Fine cracks have not formed here because moisture still remains near the surface. The mud is in between states, not flooded, not dry, and like many in-between places, it holds a quiet richness. In such damp margins, seeds may wait, insects may feed, and microscopic life may continue in the thin film of water between grains. The surface looks simple, but it is active in small ways. You can imagine the mud cooling slowly under the night air, keeping enough warmth below to sustain its hidden processes. The wetland's quiet is never absence. We pass the damp margin and return to a place where water touches the roots directly. The roots disappear into darkness, and a few floating leaves have gathered around them. One leaf turns slowly, perhaps moved by a current too faint to feel. Its underside flashes paler for a moment, then darkens again. The movement is small enough to be almost a dream. That is how much of the night proceeds here, in almost dreams. A wingbeat nearly heard, a ripple nearly seen, a scent almost named. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands do not push their details forward. They let you approach them gently, and if you drift away before understanding, they do not mind. They continue in their own slow completeness. The open water begins to narrow again as the bank curves inward and the trees gather ahead. We move with the curve, leaving the wider floodplain behind without any farewell. The sound changes once more, becoming enclosed, leafier, closer to the ear. The air grows stiller beneath the trees. You can feel the wetland drawing us into another shaded corridor. This corridor is lined with older paperbarks, their trunks thicker and more textured. Some rise straight from the water, while others stand on slightly raised ground, with roots exposed like dark fingers. The water between them is calm and black, with small floating patches of vegetation. Above, the canopy filters starlight into fragments. We enter quietly, as though entering a sleeping room. The science of this corridor is the science of shade and shelter. Lower light changes which plants can grow beneath the trees. Cooler water near the shaded bank can hold different conditions from sunlit shallows. Fallen leaves add organic matter, and roots provide structure for aquatic life. None of this feels technical when you are here. It feels like intimacy. You can picture a fish resting under a root, a beetle clinging to a stem, a frog tucked among damp leaves, and insects moving through air that smells of bark and water. Each life has found a small fit within the larger pattern. We do not need to separate them from the whole. They are the wetland as much as the trees and pools are. The corridor bends gently, and the far end is hidden. That hiddenness is restful now. It means the journey can continue without becoming a task. We only need the next few feet of water, the next pale trunk, the next low sound from the reeds. Sleep itself often arrives this way, not as a destination, but as a soft bend in a familiar path. The paperbark trunks in this enclosed place seem almost luminous. Their pale bark catches tiny amounts of starlight and gives them back as a muted glow. In places where the bark has peeled, darker layers show beneath, like shadow under cloth. The contrast is soft, never sharp. Everything in this wetland seems to prefer gradients to edges. Gradients are everywhere here. Wet to dry, open to shaded, warm to cool, flooded to exposed. Day to night, sound to silence. The Kakadu paperbark wetlands are made from these gradual passages, and because of that, they feel gentle even when they are complex. You can let the mind move through its own gradients too, from alertness toward rest, from thought toward drift. A cluster of reeds leans across the corridor, their tips nearly touching the water. Each stem casts a thin reflection, and together they make a dark comb across the surface. A small insect lands on one stem and the whole reed trembles slightly, then grows still. The reflection trembles too, as if the water has felt the insect's weight through the plant. This connection between surfaces is part of the wetland's quiet wonder. A light touch in the air can become a movement in water. A falling leaf can change the shelter below. A flood far upstream can alter a pool here. A season of rain can shape a forest's growth for years. Nothing is isolated, and yet nothing feels crowded. We move beneath the leaning reeds and into a darker pocket of still water. The air here is thick with the scent of wet leaves. It is a deep, green-brown scent, softened by night and carried low over the surface. You might feel it more in the chest than in the nose, as if the wetland were asking the body to slow from the inside. The water itself is quiet enough to hold reflections almost perfectly. A paperbark trunk becomes a pale column descending below the surface. A branch becomes a dark line in two worlds. One star appears between leaves above, and another appears below, trembling only when a tiny ripple passes. We look without trying to capture it. We let the reflection be temporary. Temporary things can be very peaceful when they are allowed to be temporary. The ripple does not fail by fading. The flower does not fail by closing. The wet season does not fail by ending. And the dry season does not fail by waiting for rain. In Kakadu's paperbark wetlands, every phase belongs, and each one makes space for the next. A soft rustling begins in the leaves overhead, then settles into stillness. Perhaps a small night animal has moved along a branch, or perhaps the breeze changed direction. The exact cause remains hidden, and the wetland keeps its privacy. You hear the movement, acknowledge it, and let it pass. The night feels no less calm for having life within it. We continue, and the corridor becomes narrower, with water close on both sides of a raised root-bound strip. Paperbark roots cross the ground and disappear into mud, making natural patterns under leaf litter. You can imagine the ground cool through the soles of bare feet. though we keep the experience soft and inward. The sensory world is enough without needing to step hard into it. Roots are the wetland's quiet anchors. They hold trees upright, bind soil, shape banks, and create countless small sheltered spaces. In flood, they meet moving water. In dryness, they remain in warming earth. They are practical and hidden, yet the whole visible forest depends on them. You can feel their importance beneath the calm surface of the scene. This thought, too, can be restful. So much that supports us is unseen. Breath, heartbeat, ground, darkness, memory, and the long work of natural systems all hold more than we usually notice. Tonight, we are noticing gently, without effort, allowing the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands to become a slow reminder of hidden support. The raised strip ends at another small pool, round and dark, enclosed by trunks. The pool feels almost private, like a bowl of night held inside the forest. A few floating leaves rest near the center. Their edges are barely visible. Around the rim, mossy dampness darkens the bases of the trees, and the smell of wet bark is close and clean. We pause here because the pool seems to ask for stillness. There is no obvious movement at first. Then a tiny bubble rises near a submerged stem and opens without sound. A faint ripple spreads, touches a floating leaf, and changes its angle. The leaf drifts a little, stops, and the pool returns to its rounded calm. Such bubbles can come from sediments, where organic matter is breaking down in low oxygen conditions. The wetland is always exchanging gases with air and water, always shifting chemistry in ways too slow and small for drama. This hidden breathing is part of its life. You can imagine it as the mud's quiet whisper, rising now and then through dark water. Your own breathing may feel matched to it now. Slow in, slow out. A pause, then another breath. The wetland does not demand perfect stillness from you. It only offers a rhythm steady enough to join. We remain beside the enclosed pool, letting its dark surface hold the moment without asking where we should go next. The paperbarks around the pool vary in age and shape. Some are slender and straight, some are forked, some lean over the water as if drawn by their own reflections. Their leaves make a loose canopy, open enough for stars to appear between them. The scene feels both sheltered and connected to the sky, a small room under a vast ceiling. This is one of the quiet marvels of wetlands. They can feel enclosed and immense at the same time. A small pool among trees can hold the moon, the stars, the scent of soil, the chemistry of decay, the shelter of roots, and the seasonal memory of a floodplain. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands make that especially clear. Every small pool belongs to rain patterns, plant communities, animal movements, and the slow shaping of low ground over time. It is never only a pool, it is a resting point in a network, a soft gathering place where many paths of water and life briefly meet. We are resting at that meeting place now. A faint lightness appears along one edge of the pool where a pale trunk leans close to the surface. The bark's reflection blurs in the water, and for a moment it seems like a path of dim brightness leading downward. We follow it only with our eyes. It goes nowhere we need to enter. It simply gives the darkness a gentle shape. The wetland's darkness is not a wall. It is a medium, like water or air, holding things that reveal themselves slowly. You can feel safe inside its softness, because we are not seeking intensity here. We are seeking the calm of a natural place that continues whether or not it is watched. And that calm is everywhere around the pool. After a while, we move again, leaving the enclosed water to its own night. The path is not marked, but the spaces between trunks guide us. The ground is slightly higher here, drier on the surface, and the leaf litter makes a faint, papery texture under the imagined step. It smells different from the wet margin, lighter and more woody, though moisture remains close below. This raised ground may become more important during floods, offering brief refuge for some plants and small creatures, while the lower hollows fill and connect. In the dry season, it may seem ordinary, just a gentle rise among trees. But wetlands are full of such modest differences that matter greatly at the right time. The land's quiet grammar is written in height, moisture, shade, and timing. We follow that grammar without translating every line. A higher patch, a lower pool, a root crossing, a bend in the channel. The body understands them as rhythm. The mind can let them pass like phrases in a song, each one related to the next, each one carrying the same slow feeling forward through the Kakadu night. The trees thin ahead, and a pale band of open sky returns. We are approaching another edge where the paperbark forest meets a broader wet meadow. The grass there is low and damp, with scattered shallow pools reflecting the stars. The air feels wider again, and a cooler breeze moves across the open ground before reaching us under the trees. At this edge, you can feel the wetlands' layered habitats meeting. Behind us, bark, roots, and shade. Ahead, grass, shallow water, and open sky. Between them, a band of mixed life where insects rise, frogs call, and birds may feed when dawn comes. Edges like this are not borders in a hard sense, they are invitations for exchange. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are full of such invitations. Water invites root, flower invites insect, mud invites seed. Shade invites rest. Open pools invite reflection. Each invitation is quiet, and each is answered by some form of life. You can let the idea pass through you slowly, the way a breeze moves through reeds without keeping any part of it for itself. We step in imagination toward the wet meadow, and the ground becomes cooler. The grasses are fine and soft, bending with moisture. Drops cling to their blades, and when the breeze comes, the drops move but do not fall. The whole meadow seems to hold its breath beneath the stars, bright in tiny points near the ground and distant points overhead. In daylight, this meadow might show greens, golds, and browns, depending on season and water level. Tonight, it is made of texture and shine. Each shallow pool is a small dark mirror. Each grass stem is a thin line. Each paperbark trunk behind us is a pale vertical memory of the forest we have just passed through. We carry it with us as we enter the open. The open meadow is not separate from the trees. During wetter times, water may link it fully to the forest pools, allowing fish and aquatic invertebrates to move through places that now seem merely damp. During drier times, it may become firmer ground, with seeds waiting below the surface. The wetland expands and contracts, and each state reveals another face of the same place. You may feel how different this is from a landscape that stays visually constant. Here, the true form is the cycle. The wetland is itself when flooded, itself when drying, itself in flower, itself in dark stillness under stars. We are meeting only one evening version of it, and yet that version contains the others like folded leaves. A low chorus of insects rises from the meadow. It is finer than the frog calls and more continuous. A silver thread of sound stretched across the open dampness. The paperbarks behind us add occasional leaf whispers, and the shallow water gives back small clicks and plinks from unseen movements. The soundscape is full, but it remains soft enough for sleep. We move along the meadow's edge rather than across its center. The shallow pools there are delicate, and the grasses hold too many small lives to disturb. Staying near the paperbarks, we can feel both openness and shade. The trees stand just behind, and the water glimmers just ahead. The body rests in the middle, balanced between shelter and space. Balance is the wetland's constant achievement. Too much water for some plants, and another community appears. Less water, and a different set of species takes its turn. Heat, shade, nutrients, depth, and timing all shift across the floodplain, and life arranges itself accordingly. It sounds complicated when said plainly, but here it feels like breathing, because the system has practiced this rhythm for a very long time. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands do not need to be simplified to be soothing. Their complexity is part of their calm. It means that no single event, no single pool, and no single tree carries everything alone. The work is shared among water, soil, plants, animals, microbes, weather, and time. You can rest in a world where support is distributed so widely. A faint line of cloud appears low in the sky, barely visible against the stars. It moves slowly, or perhaps the night makes it seem slow. The cloud's underside is dark, and its edge is soft. It may bring nothing tonight, or it may belong to weather forming far away. The wetland does not react with hurry. It has known clouds of every kind. We watch the cloud drift while the meadow remains quiet. A frog call rises from one shallow pool, then another answers from under the paperbarks. The sound passes between open and shaded places, knitting them together. You can imagine the call traveling over grass, touching water, slipping between trunks, and fading into leaves. The wetland receives it on every side. This receiving quality is what stays with you. The land receives rain, the pools receive stars. The mud receives leaves, the trees receive light, the night receives sound, and as you listen, you may feel received as well, held gently by the story of a place that has no urgency, no sharp demand, and no need to pull you back toward wakefulness. We continue along the edge, and the meadow gradually gives way to another cluster of paperbarks. Their trunks stand farther apart than before, with open water between them. The reflections are longer here, reaching down into the dark pools like pale roots made of light. Each reflection trembles slightly, and each tremble is enough to remind you that stillness can include movement. The water around these trees is shallow, but at night depth becomes ambiguous. A few inches can look endless when the bottom disappears. You may know the pool is not deep, yet the darkness gives it a gentle mystery. It is not frightening, it is simply unknown in the peaceful way that sleep is unknown before you enter it. The paperbarks seem to float in that unknown, though their roots hold them firmly. This combination of floating appearance and rooted reality gives the wetland its dreamlike feeling. You see pale trunks rising from dark water, and your mind accepts both firmness and softness at once. We stay with that feeling, allowing it to loosen the hard edges of thought. In the surrounding water, aquatic plants make low shapes near the surface. Some leaves float flat, while others stand slightly above the water on thin stems. They create shade below and landing places above, modifying the pool in small ways. In wetlands, plants are not just occupants. They are engineers of quiet conditions, shaping light, flow, temperature, and shelter. You can picture the shaded water beneath the leaves as cooler, darker, and more protected. Tiny animals move there in miniature pathways. Fish may pass through slowly, larvae cling to stems. Detritus settles in soft corners. The pool is a whole world at hand's breadth, and we can honor it simply by imagining its depth of life. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, even in their quietest night, are never passive. They are actively holding water, moderating heat, cycling nutrients, and offering refuge to many forms of life. Yet all this action is spread so widely and quietly that it becomes restful. The wetland teaches that activity does not have to feel agitated. Some work is slow enough to sound like silence. A breeze slides across the open pool and touches the trunks. Loose bark edges lift faintly. Leaves shift overhead. The water changes from mirror to fine texture, then returns again as the breeze moves on. You might feel that breeze as a coolness over the skin, not strong enough to chill, just enough to remind you of air moving through warm country at night. We turn slightly with the pool's edge, and the paperbarks now stand between us and the stars. Their crowns are dark shapes, airy and irregular. Gaps between leaves show pieces of sky. The trunks below are lighter, and the water below them is darker. The whole scene seems arranged in three quiet tones: sky, bark, and pool. This simplicity can bring the mind down into rest. There is no clutter here. Even though the wetland is richly alive, it presents itself in broad, calm shapes, then offers detail only if you come closer. You can stay with the broad shapes now. Sky above, trees around, water below, and the warm, breathing air of Kakadu holding everything together. A small sound comes from a reed bed to the left, a soft brushing followed by stillness. The reeds move for a few seconds, then settle back into their dark outline. Their stems are flexible, made to bend with wind and water. Flexibility is another quiet strength of wetlands. Rigid things break more easily in changing water, while bending things endure. The thought may pass into your body as permission to soften. You do not need to hold the day in a rigid shape. You can bend with tiredness, with breath, with the slow voice, with the imaginary warmth of the wetland night. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands bend through seasons, and tonight you can bend towards sleep without effort. We walk only a little farther because the pace remains unhurried. A low bank ahead is covered in fallen bark, pale strips layered over dark soil. Some pieces curl at the edges like thin shells, others lie flat, dampened by night air. They make the ground look softly patterned, almost like a page the forest has been writing and rewriting without ink. The fallen bark will gradually break down, adding to the organic layer beneath the trees. It may shelter insects, hold moisture, and help soften the soil surface. Nothing in the wetland is merely discarded. Even what falls becomes part of another process. The forest lets go of itself slowly, and the wetland receives what is given. We pause beside that pale litter, and the scent here is more woody than muddy. It carries a dry sweetness, mixed with the deeper dampness rising from the nearby pool. You can feel the two scents meeting in the warm air. One belongs to bark and leaf. One belongs to water and soil. Together they make the specific breath of the Paperbark Wetland. The night has grown mature now, neither early nor late in feeling, simply settled. Sounds continue, but they seem farther inside the landscape, as if the wetland has absorbed them into its own pulse. You may hear frogs, insects, water, leaves, and an occasional distant bird, yet none of them stands apart for long. The whole place has become one low, living hush. We continue from the bark-littered bank into another dim passage where the paperbark trunks are spaced like quiet companions. Each one has its own lean, its own texture, its own history of watermarks and shedding bark, yet together they form a calm pattern that repeats through the wetland. You recognize them now. Their pale forms have become familiar. Familiarity is one of the ways a sleep landscape becomes safe. The first time you see the dark pool, it is unknown. The second time, it is part of the rhythm. By now, water, trunk, reed, and reflection have returned often enough that your mind no longer needs to examine them sharply. It can rest among them, letting each return deepen the calm. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are especially suited to this kind of return because they are patterned by repetition with variation. Another pool, but not the same pool. Another trunk, but not the same shape. Another frog call, but from another distance. Another reflection, but under a slightly different sky. The place repeats like breathing, never mechanical, always alive. A narrow band of water crosses our path, connecting one pool to another. It is shallow and smooth, with tiny floating fragments of leaf. The connection may be temporary, depending on season and water level, but tonight it is enough to let water pass quietly between hollows. You can see how the wetland links itself in small ways, making continuity out of low places. Water always teaches continuity. It finds a route through roots, grass, channels, and basins. It slows where the land is flat, deepens where the ground dips, and spreads where there is room. The wetland does not force it into a single line. It allows wandering, and through wandering, the water nourishes more of the landscape. We can wander too, within the calm boundaries of the voice. There is no need to arrive at the far side. We can follow a glimmer, a scent, a sound, and then another. The script moves like the wetland's water, not straight, but connected. Each image leads softly to the next, and each one remains close to the paperbarks and pools of Kakadu. The connecting water reflects a small branch overhead. The branch looks black against the dim shine, and its reflection looks like another branch reaching upward from below. Between them, the surface holds the meeting. You can rest your attention on that thin, shimmering line where above and below touch without becoming the same. This line is a good place for sleep. Wakefulness is above, dreaming is below, and for a while you float between them, held by the surface. The wetland knows such in-between states well. It is between land and water, wet season and dry season, open sky and shaded root, decay and renewal. It makes a home from thresholds. We move on, and the ground beyond the narrow water is soft again. The air seems warmer here, perhaps sheltered from the breeze by the trees. Moisture gathers on leaves and skin in the imagination, not as discomfort, but as the gentle closeness of a living wetland. You can feel the night pressing lightly around you, full of scent and quiet sound. A few fireflies or small glowing insects may appear in warmer, wet places. faint and intermittent, though never enough to brighten the scene. A point of light appears near the grass, pauses, and vanishes. Another flickers deeper among the trunks. The glow is delicate, almost private. It belongs to the wetland's night language, brief signals passing through humid air. Bioluminescence and insect light often feel magical because they make darkness visible without defeating it. They do not turn night into day. They simply place tiny lamps inside it, enough to suggest life moving quietly beyond our full understanding. In the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, even a faint flicker can feel like a star that has come down among the roots. We watch the tiny lights without following them. They appear when they appear, and then the darkness closes softly around them. The pool beside us remains still, with pale bark reflected in long, wavering strokes. Frogs call, insects hum. The air is warm, and the hidden wetland continues its patient work beneath every surface. This is where attention can become very soft. You do not have to hold the shape of the whole journey anymore. The place is familiar enough to carry you. Paperbark, pool, reed, mud, star, scent, and slow breath return in gentle sequence. We remain inside that sequence, allowing the words to thin slightly while the feeling stays full. Ahead, the water widens once more, but only a little, making a quiet basin tucked among trees. The basin's surface is darker than the sky and smoother than the leaf litter around it. A few narrow leaves float near the middle, arranged by currents we cannot see. The paperbarks lean over it, as if the basin were a secret they have kept for many seasons. It may fill deeply during monsoon months and shrink to a smaller pool later in the year. It may hold fish while water remains connected, then become a refuge for insects and amphibians when other shallows dry. Its role changes with the season, but it remains part of the wetland's pattern. You can feel that pattern continuing whether or not we name every phase. We sit in imagination at the edge, not on a chair or platform, but close to the living ground, where the smell of wet soil rises and the roots create natural places for shadow. The basin is calm enough to slow the eyes. You look at it, and the mind lowers its voice. Even the stars reflected there seem quieter than the stars above. The paperbark wetlands of Kakadu are not silent in the absolute sense, yet they create a silence inside sound. The chorus does not disturb the rest because it is steady, and the small movements do not disturb the stillness because they belong to it. You can hear life continuing without feeling called to respond. That is part of the sleepful peace of this place. A pale strip of bark loosens from a trunk and hangs downward, motionless in the humid air. It looks like a soft ribbon in the dark. Over time it may fall, settle on the ground, dampen, and join the layer of forest material below. For now, it remains attached, held between tree and earth, another quiet threshold in a landscape of thresholds. We let our attention rest on that hanging bark for a few breaths. It is ordinary and beautiful. Its color is muted, its edge irregular, its purpose simple. There is no need for it to become a symbol, though the mind may soften around it anyway. Sometimes an ordinary detail can hold the whole mood of a place. The basin water gives one faint ripple, then stills. The hanging bark remains. The frogs continue. The insects hold their fine, even thread of sound. Around us, the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands settle more deeply into night, and we settle with them, not reaching the end of anything, only moving farther into the calm middle of the dark. From here, the next channel is barely visible, a narrow gleam slipping between trunks at the far side of the basin. We move toward it slowly, carrying the quiet of the enclosed pool with us. The ground dips, the air cools by a small degree, the scent of water becomes stronger again, and the paperbarks gather closer, as though inviting us into another hush. The narrow gleam becomes a channel only when we are close enough to feel its coolness rising. It lies between the trees like a dark ribbon, carrying the faintest movement through the paperbark roots. You can hear the water touching small stems at the edge, a soft, irregular murmur that seems to come from very near the ground. We follow it without stepping hard, letting the channel set the pace. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands feel more enclosed here, as if the forest has drawn its pale trunks around the water to keep the night warm. Leaves hang lower, and the air smells of damp bark, tannin, and the green breath of plants that have been standing in moisture all day. A few stars show through the canopy in small pieces. Their light is thin, but it is enough for the water to remember them. As the channel curves, the bank rises and falls in slow undulations. Some places are firm with old roots and packed leaf litter, while others give way to dark mud and shallow pools. These small differences guide the wetland's life, deciding where a seed can rest, where a frog can call, and where water can linger after the floods draw back. You can feel the land thinking in very small measures. We move through that quiet pattern, and the channel widens slightly, showing a faint brown shine where starlight touches the surface. In daylight, this water might show the tea color of decomposing leaves, shaded by paper bark and stained by organic matter. Tonight, it is almost black, but the smell tells you it is alive and warm. The wetland keeps its richness low, close to the mud. A small cluster of lilies appears ahead, their leaves floating close together in a sheltered bend. Some leaves are nearly round, while others have not fully opened, their edges still curled upward like sleeping hands. You can imagine droplets resting on them, round and patient, catching whatever light can find its way through the trees. We pause beside them because they make the channel feel like a quiet room. Beneath those leaves, stems reach down into the soft bed of the wetland. They anchor in mud that holds nutrients from seasons of fallen bark, grass, flowers, and flood-borne silt. Small creatures shelter there, moving among stems and shadows, while the leaves above soften the light and calm the surface. It is a gentle architecture built from growth rather than stone. The paperbarks around the bend lean toward the water as if listening. Their bark is pale enough to mark each trunk in the darkness, and each reflection stretches below like another forest turned upside down. You may notice how your eyes begin to rest on vertical lines, one after another. Trunk, reflection, reed, stem. The repetition is soothing because it is natural and uneven. In the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, repetition never becomes mechanical. Water repeats itself as pools and channels, but every pool has a different edge. Trees repeat themselves as pale trunks, but every trunk bends in its own way. Frog calls return, yet each call comes from another hidden pocket of wet grass. You can let that pattern carry you without needing to hold it carefully. The channel deepens for a few steps, or perhaps the darkness only makes it seem deeper. A cooler scent rises from it, less muddy and more open, as if water from a larger pool has slipped into this narrow place. You feel the change in the imaginary air along your skin. The wetland is teaching through small variations the way a sleeping body senses a blanket, a breeze, or the quiet weight of night. Ahead, the trees part enough for the channel to join a broader lagoon. We arrive slowly, with the water widening before us and the canopy lifting into a larger sky. The lagoon is calm, dark, and edged with paperbarks whose trunks stand partly in reflection. Beyond them, a low fringe of reeds makes a soft boundary between open water and hidden ground. The whole place seems to be holding its breath. This lagoon belongs to the same wetland, but it carries a different feeling from the narrow channel. There is more sky here, more room for sound to travel, and more space for reflections to spread. You can see a faint shimmer where open water catches the stars. The edges remain close enough to feel sheltered, yet the center of the lagoon opens into a quiet, spacious dark. Lagoons like this can become important resting and feeding places within the seasonal floodplain. When water levels are high, they may connect with channels and surrounding shallows, allowing fish and other aquatic life to move through the landscape. When water levels fall, they may hold on longer than the thinner sheets of floodwater around them. In that lingering water, life gathers quietly. You do not need to picture the lagoon crowded. Its abundance can remain soft and hidden. A fish turns beneath a lily leaf. A frog waits among reeds. Insects hover over the surface in loose, silent patterns. Birds may return at dawn, stepping along the margins where shallow water meets mud. For now, night has softened every role into presence. We stay near the lagoon's edge, where the smell of water is full and steady. The mud gives off its warm, organic scent, and the paperbark leaves add a faint, resinous note when the breeze moves through them. A small ripple reaches the bank and presses against the roots. It makes a sound so low that it feels almost like touch. You breathe with it, slowly. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are shaped not only by water arriving, but by water waiting. Waiting changes everything. It allows sediments to settle, plants to root, algae to grow, insects to develop, and birds to find food. Fast water carves and passes on, but slow water gathers, nourishes, and remembers. This lagoon is one of those remembering places, dark and open beneath the night. A narrow moon, if it is present, rests low behind the trees and gives the bark a faint silver edge. If there is no moon, the trunks still carry a dull whiteness of their own, as if the day's light has remained in them. You can feel how these pale forms hold the lagoon together visually, preventing the darkness from becoming empty. They are quiet markers in a wide, wet room. Across the water, something moves through reeds with a soft brush and then becomes still. It may be a bird shifting in sleep, or a small animal finding shelter, or simply reeds settling after a breath of air. The sound does not break the calm, it deepens it, because it reminds you that the wetland is inhabited without needing to be loud. We listen for a while, letting the lagoon arrange itself around us. Near sounds are crisp but soft, small lappings at the bank and a frog close by. Far sounds are blurred, another frog, another insect chorus, a faint movement among trees. The space between them is wide and dark. Your mind can spread out there, resting between the near and the far. The science of sound in a wetland is simple to feel. Water carries some sounds differently from dry ground, and open spaces let calls travel across the surface. Vegetation absorbs and softens other sounds, making the forested edges feel intimate. As we stand here, the lagoon and paperbark trees shape what you hear, turning the night into a calm acoustic shelter. You may feel your body becoming heavier as the sounds continue. That heaviness is welcome. The wetland itself is full of gentle weight, water resting in basins, roots holding soil, leaves lying on mud, warm air settling after sunset. Nothing here is weightless, and yet nothing feels burdened. The weight is simply belonging, each thing resting where it is. We move along the lagoon's margin where the bank curves under a row of older paperbarks. Their roots grip the edge, creating small overhangs and shadowed hollows just above the waterline. Floating leaves collect in these places. So do tiny bits of bark, grass, and seed. The lagoon edits the day's fallen fragments into quiet patterns along the shore. A few of those fragments drift outward, caught by a mild surface current. They move slowly enough that you can follow them without effort. One pale strip of bark turns once, glides past a reflection, and settles against a lily stem. There is no urgency in its travel. It belongs to the lagoon while moving, and it belongs to the lagoon when still. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands often feel like this, full of motion that has given up haste. Rain may arrive with force in the wet season, but once spread across the floodplain, it learns the flatness of the land. It slows, warms, darkens with leaves, and becomes habitat. Even movement is softened here by space, roots, stems, and the low shape of the country. You can let the same softening happen inside the narration. A thought may arrive with a little speed, then slow as it enters the wetland's broad rhythm. It spreads, loses its sharp edge, and becomes only another ripple in the dark. We keep walking by the lagoon, and the night takes each sentence gently, as water takes a falling leaf. At the far edge of the lagoon, the paperbarks give way to a stand of taller grasses. Their seed heads catch the faint light and move together when the breeze crosses them. The sound is different from leaves, finer and drier, though the stems rise from damp ground. You can hear the grass whispering above the wet soil, carrying both dryness and moisture in one breath. This meeting of dry and wet is central to Kakadu's seasonal beauty. The landscape does not remain submerged, and it does not remain dry. It passes between states, sometimes holding water high among tree trunks, sometimes concentrating it into channels and lagoons, sometimes leaving damp hollows where grasses rise. The paperbark wetlands endure because they are adapted to these passages. We pause near the grasses and notice how the smell changes again. There is less deep mud here and more warm stem, more dry seed, more open air. Yet the lagoon remains beside us, cool and dark, anchoring the scent with water. The combination is subtle and very restful. It is the smell of a place between seasons, even if we do not name the season exactly. A moth crosses low over the grass, a pale shape that appears only when it passes in front of darker water. Its wings beat without sound. It moves in a loose path, guided by scent, temperature, and senses different from ours. You watch it drift, disappear, and appear again. The wetland is full of these partial revelations, each one brief and complete. The lagoon narrows now, feeding another passage through the trees. We enter it as if entering a quieter octave of the same song. The water is close again, the trunks close, the sky broken to small shapes overhead. Your attention, which widened over the lagoon, narrows without strain. It follows the channel the way water follows the low ground. In this more sheltered place, the air feels almost still. The insect hum is softened by leaves and frog calls come from hidden pockets of water on either side. A faint drip falls from somewhere above, then another, though no rain is falling. Moisture has gathered on leaves and released itself slowly. The sound is delicate, a wetland metronome that refuses to hurry. The paperbark roots along the channel are partly exposed, dark and sinuous above the mud. They create small shelves and cavities where water can pause. During flood, these roots may stand fully submerged, surrounded by fish, drifting leaves, and suspended particles. During drier times, they may be ringed by damp soil and leaf litter. Tonight, they hold the margin between both ideas. You can sense how many memories a root might keep if it could speak in a human way. The rise of warm floodwater, the pull of drying mud, the shade of its own leaves, the brushing of reeds and floating bark, the slow thickening of soil around it. We do not need it to speak. Its shape is enough. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands have many such silent records. Watermarks on trunks, sediment layers in basins, seed banks in soil, fallen branches caught in root tangles, and plant communities arranged by depth and duration all tell the story without a single dramatic gesture. The place records change in forms that remain quiet. You can rest among those records as though among old books left open under starlight. We follow the root-edged channel until it becomes shallow and braided, dividing around small raised clumps of sedge. Each thread of water reflects a little darkness, a little bark, and a little star. The clumps between them are damp, green, and breathing through their leaves. Nothing is straight here. The water chooses several paths, and each path is accepted. This braided pattern is calming because it does not insist on one way. The wetland can move through many small channels at once, rejoining later or fading into the ground. Life can also move in many ways by root, wing, seed, current, call, and patient waiting. We let the idea be soft. We do not turn it into instruction. We simply walk beside the branching water. A frog close to the bank gives a low call that vibrates through the grass. The sound is round, almost wooden, and it ends with a gentle drop into silence. Another call answers from farther away, thinner with distance. The two voices make the space between them visible in the mind. You can feel the wetland stretching quietly around their exchange. Frogs depend on water, but in seasonal wetlands their lives often follow timing with great precision. Rain, humidity, temperature, and the availability of shallow pools all shape when they call, breed, and shelter. Their voices at night are part of the wetland's calendar. When we hear them, we are hearing more than sound. We are hearing conditions made audible. The channel threads continue toward a darker stand of paperbarks. Their trunks seem closer together than before, and the spaces between them are filled with shadow. We enter slowly, and the air cools by another slight degree. The scent of damp bark becomes stronger again. The world beyond the trees grows less important, as if the wetland has folded us into its inner layers. Here, the canopy is denser, and the night feels almost green, though color has mostly gone. Leaves gather overhead, narrow and still, with only the smallest stirring at their tips. The ground is wet in hollows and softly littered on raised patches. You can imagine the whole place as a slow lung, drawing in the dampness of the channel and breathing it back through leaf and bark. The paperbark tree is well suited to this breathing landscape. Its form allows it to stand through inundation and heat, shedding bark, renewing surfaces, and participating in the wetland cycles. Its leaves, flowers, bark, roots, and fallen litter all enter the web around it. In the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, the trees are not background. They are the calm, vertical heart of the place. You may notice how often we return to them. That return is intentional, and it matches the landscape itself. No matter where the water leads, the pale trunks come back into view. They orient us without urgency. They say, in their silent way, that we are still in the same wet country, still under the same night, still moving slowly among rooted things. A soft clearing appears within the denser stand, not open to the sky, but open enough for the trunks to spread apart. The water here is shallow and scattered in small dark patches. Between them, the ground is spongy with wet leaves. A few young paperbarks rise from this dampness, slender and pale, their small crowns reaching toward the dim gaps above. This is how the forest renews itself when conditions allow. Seeds find places where light, moisture, and soil meet in the right proportion. Some seedlings will not last through every season, while others will become part of the stand, adding new trunks to the old pattern. There is no hurry in this renewal. The wetland tries many small beginnings and keeps the ones that belong. We step in imagination around the young trees, careful and slow. Their bark is smoother, less layered, and their leaves seem finer against the darkness. They bring a quieter scale to the clearing, reminding you that even ancient-feeling landscapes are always beginning somewhere. Kakadu's paperbark wetlands are old in rhythm, but young in countless individual lives. A tiny glint appears on one young leaf, perhaps a drop of moisture caught in starlight. It holds for a moment, then dims as the leaf turns slightly. The drop is almost nothing, yet it contains the surrounding darkness, the leaf, and a pin of sky. The wetland's vastness is present even there, in something small enough to vanish with the breath. We linger with that smallness. Sleep often comes when the mind stops reaching for large conclusions and rests in one simple image, a drop on a leaf, a pale trunk in water, a frog call far away, a warm scent rising from mud. We can let each one pass slowly, like beads on a string that does not need to be finished. Beyond the clearing, another channel moves through a denser screen of reeds. We hear it before we see it, a faint lapping and a damp rustle where water presses against stems. The reeds stand tall and close, their bases hidden in darkness. We follow the sound, and the paperbark trunks remain behind us for a moment, pale guardians at the edge of the reed shadow. Reeds and sedges help stabilize wetland margins, slow water, and provide shelter for many small lives. Their stems break the force of flow, catch fine sediment, and create complex spaces where insects, frogs, and young fish can hide. In a place like this, structure is habitat. A simple stem becomes a wall, a perch, a ladder, and a shadow. You can feel the texture of the reed bed without entering it. The air near it is cooler and wetter. The stems make a faint, dry whisper above the water, and a softer brushing below. The smell is grassy, green, and slightly sweet. We stay at its edge, where the channel turns, and watch the dark water disappear between the vertical lines. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are a landscape of verticals and horizontals meeting softly. Tree trunks rise. Reed stems rise. Water lies flat. Mud lies below. Reflections draw the verticals downward, and floating leaves interrupt the horizontals with roundness. The eye can rest in this simple geometry, softened by growth and darkness until nothing feels rigid. A small insect lands on the surface near the reed edge, and the water dimples beneath it. It moves in a quick arc, then pauses. Around it, the surface tension holds like a delicate skin. In that tiny physical detail, the wetland becomes intimate. Water is not merely a background. It has qualities, boundaries, responses, and a subtle strength of its own. Surface tension allows small creatures to move over water, while light reflections reveal tiny disturbances and films of organic matter. Such details may sound scientific in another setting, But here they are simply part of what you see when you look gently. The wetland does not separate beauty from physical law. It makes law visible in quiet, delicate ways. We turn from the reed edge and follow the channel back toward Paperbark shade. The path is curving now, and the repeated bends make time feel circular. We are not lost. We are being carried through variations of the same calm place. Pool, trunk, reed, channel, open water, shade and scent return, each return bringing you deeper into familiarity. The night air presses softly around the trees. It is warm enough to relax the body, but the water keeps it from feeling still in a heavy way. Little coolnesses rise from pools and drift through root spaces. You can imagine them touching your hands, your face, your closed eyelids. The wetland becomes less a scene and more a climate of rest. In that climate, thoughts may begin to thin. When one appears, it does not need to be followed. The paperbark trunks are there. The water is there. The frogs and insects continue in their steady pattern. We remain with them, and the story remains with the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, never leaving for anything brighter or louder. A low branch crosses above the channel, thick enough to hold mosses, lichens, and small patches of dampness in its rough places. Its bark is darker than the trunk below, shaded by leaves and night. A few fine roots or fibers hang from it, catching moisture from the air. The branch makes an arch, and we pass beneath it slowly. For a moment beneath the branch, the world is close. Bark overhead, water below, leaves beside us, mud at the edge. This closeness has a deep soothing quality because everything is near enough to feel held, but nothing presses too sharply. The wetland makes a shelter from living forms, each one softening the next. Then the branch is behind us, and the channel widens into a pocket of open water, no larger than a small courtyard. Stars appear again in the surface, scattered among floating leaves. The paperbarks ring the pocket loosely, and their reflections create a pale fence below. A breeze enters from one side, moves across the water, and fades among the trunks. You can watch the breeze's path by watching the stars tremble. The far reflections shake first, then the center, then the near edge. Afterward, the pocket grows smooth again, as if the water has taken a slow breath and released it. We take one with it. The rhythm remains unforced. The sediments beneath this pocket have likely shifted many times. Floodwater may have deepened it slightly, roots may have held one side firm, and fallen plant matter may have filled another part. Wetlands are always negotiating their own shapes through deposition, growth, decay, and gentle erosion. The resulting forms are modest, but they matter. They decide where water rests. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands teach that a basin does not need to be dramatic to be profound. A shallow hollow can hold stars, shelter larvae, nourish roots, soften heat, and gather the scent of night. It can do this quietly, year after year, through the ordinary patience of low ground. You can let that modest profundity settle into the mind. We continue around the pocket, keeping the water to one side and the pale trunks to the other. A few leaves fall at long intervals, though we hear only one touch the surface. It lands lightly, floats, and begins to darken as water reaches its edges. The fall is complete, but the leaf story in the wetland is just beginning. Soon it may become waterlogged and sink. Later it may soften, fragment, and feed microbes, insects, or other small organisms. In time, its matter may pass into mud, plant tissue, or the body of some wetland creature. Nothing about this is hurried. The leaf has entered the wetland's slow circulation, where endings become materials for continuation. This circulation is one reason the atmosphere feels so ancient. You are surrounded by forms that have been passing into one another for countless seasons. Bark into soil, water into vapor, flower into seed, seed into tree, tree into shade, shade into cooler water. The cycle is not a closed loop drawn on a page. It is a breathing, changing pattern, alive in every direction. A faint fragrance comes from somewhere ahead, slightly floral, carried in a thin strand through the humid air. It may belong to paperbark blossoms or another wetland plant flowering unseen. The scent is delicate enough that you notice it only when the breeze brings it directly toward you. Then it fades, and the mud and water return to the front of the breath. We follow that fading fragrance into a looser stand of trees. Here the ground seems drier beneath the leaf litter, though water gleams in hollows nearby. The paperbarks have more space between them, and their crowns spread wider. The air moves more freely. Your body might feel the difference as relief, not because the denser forest was uncomfortable, but because the wetland is offering another variation of calm. Variation keeps the journey alive without waking it. A narrower channel, then a wider pool, denser trees, then open spacing, stronger mud scent, then woody bark scent, near frog calls, then distant ones. Each change is small enough to preserve the sleepful rhythm, but distinct enough to keep the listener gently located in place. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands continue around us in this loose breathing pattern. We have not left them, and they have not become abstract. They are still warm air, pale bark, dark water, soft ground, low calls, and hidden life. If you drifted for a while and returned now, you would still know where you are. You are beside the paperbarks, under the night, moving slowly with the wetland. A small open hollow appears in the leaf litter, filled with shallow water and fallen bark strips. The water is so still that each strip seems placed by hand, though flood, wind, and gravity arranged them. Some strips overlap like pale fish scales. Others curl upward at the edges. The hollow is not large, but it is beautiful in the way of things found close to the ground. We kneel only in imagination and look without touching. The bark strips are softening from below, still dry looking above, halfway between tree and soil. Their pale color glows faintly in the dark hollow. Tiny insects may shelter beneath them, and microbes are already beginning the slow work of transformation. The wetlands processes are visible here at the scale of a hand. You can let that small hollow become the whole world for a moment. There is enough there: water, bark, reflection, darkness, and time. The mind does not need more. It can rest in the completeness of a small place, because the small place is connected to everything around it through moisture, scent, life, and decay. The path of our attention lifts again, moving from the hollow to the surrounding trunks. Their bases widen slightly where they meet the ground, and the bark near the base is darker from contact with moisture. Higher up, the trunks pale again, catching faint light. This gradual change from dark foot to pale body repeats from tree to tree, a quiet pattern written by water level and air. Water leaves traces without speaking. A stain on bark, a softened bank, a line of debris caught in grass, a deposit of silt in a low hollow. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are full of these traces, and reading them would tell the story of recent seasons. Tonight, we do not need to read them fully. We only need to sense that the story is there. A warm stillness returns as the breeze falls away. The insect hum becomes the main sound, continuous and delicate. It is not a single note, but many overlapping calls, too fine to separate. Together they make the air shimmer. You may feel your thoughts dissolving into that shimmer, not disappearing completely, but losing their hard outlines. The water in the nearby hollow reflects one star. The star trembles slightly, then steadies. It is strange and soothing to see something so distant held by something so near. A small pool in the leaf litter can carry a point of light from the sky. The wetland brings far things close, and close things become part of the vastness. We move on from the hollow, not because we are finished with it, but because the wetland continues. The loose stand slopes almost imperceptibly toward another low basin. You can feel the change before seeing water, in the cooler air near the ground, and the darker scent of mud. The paperbarks thicken again ahead, and their pale trunks gather like quiet figures around a hidden pool. As we approach, the pool reveals itself in pieces. First a dark shine between roots, then a floating leaf, then the reflection of a trunk, then the wider curve of the water's edge. The pool has been there all along, concealed by angle and darkness. Many things in the wetland are like that. They do not appear suddenly. Your awareness simply becomes aligned with them. The hidden pool is deep enough to feel still, though likely shallow by other measures. Its surface is smooth and dark, with a faint film of floating pollen or plant matter near one side. The smell is rich, but not sharp. Around the edge, grasses lean inward, and the paperbark roots create a rough, sheltering rim. We stand beside it quietly. In such pools, sunlight during the day feeds algae and aquatic plants, while shade moderates temperature and gives refuge. At night, oxygen levels and animal activity can shift, creating a different rhythm from daylight. The wetland is not the same hour by hour. It breathes chemically and biologically, as well as visually. You can sense that slow breathing in the darkness of the pool. A single bubble rises near the center and opens with a tiny sound. The rings move outward, touching the floating leaves one by one. A leaf lifts, rocks gently, and settles. Then the rings reach the bank and vanish among the roots. You watch the whole movement because it is small enough to soothe and complete enough to satisfy the eye. The pool returns to stillness, but it is not the same stillness as before. Something has moved through it and been received. That is often how rest works. A sound, a thought, a sensation, or a memory rises, makes a few rings and fades into the wider calm. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands hold this pattern everywhere tonight. We stay for several breaths, and the night seems to deepen by very small degrees. The trunks become less separate from the darkness, though their pale bark still glows faintly. The water becomes less like a surface and more like an opening. The air becomes less like air and more like a warm, quiet substance holding scent, sound, moisture, and the slow pulse of the place. A distant call moves across the wetland, low and unhurried. It comes from beyond the pool, beyond the next trees, perhaps near another open stretch of water. The call fades before we can identify it with certainty. Its uncertainty is peaceful. It tells us the landscape continues beyond sight, but it does not ask us to follow quickly. We follow slowly anyway, leaving the pool by a narrow passage between trunks. The passage is lined with damp leaves, and the ground gives softly under each imagined step. The paperbark bark above us is layered and pale, and in places it hangs loose enough to cast little shadows on itself. You can feel how texture becomes more important as the night grows darker. Texture is the night's language. Smooth water, rough bark, soft mud, fine grass, cool air, damp leaf. Each texture reaches the mind through memory of touch, even when we are only listening. The narration gives you these surfaces gently, so the body can settle into them without effort. We are walking through a tactile dream of the wetland. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands remain warm, but the deepest heat of the day has gone. The water has taken some of it, the mud has stored some of it, and the air has released some into the higher night. This slow cooling is part of the wetland's comfort. It mirrors the body settling towards sleep, warmth held inside, surface softening, breath becoming even. The passage opens onto another broad area, but this one is mostly grass, with scattered pools shining between low blades. The paperbarks stand along the margins, and in small islands where the ground rises slightly, the stars above appear clearer here, and the horizon feels farther away. We have returned to openness, but it is a darker, quieter openness than before. At the edge of this grassy basin, water rests in shallow sheets. Some places may be only a thin film over mud, enough to reflect the sky and keep the ground alive with moisture. Other places deepen into small pools where stems rise and insects gather. The basin is a mosaic, and each piece holds a slightly different condition. The wetland's richness lies in this fine variation. You can imagine the basin during daylight, bright with birds, reflections, and green growth, but we keep the image dim because night is our companion. The grasses are dark now, the pools are black, and the paperbarks are pale around the edges. The scene has been reduced to its calmest elements. It is easier to rest here because the world is not asking to be visually solved. A breeze crosses the grassy basin, and the stems bend in a slow wave. The movement begins far away, travels toward us, and passes around our feet in the imagination. Then it moves into the paperbarks behind us, where it becomes a different sound. Grass whisper becomes leaf whisper, and leaf whisper fades into the channel's soft murmur. This is how the wetland translates movement from one form to another. Wind becomes wave in grass, wind becomes ripple in water, wind becomes sound in leaves, water becomes reflection, reflection becomes mood. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are full of such translations, and we can let the mind be translated too, from wakefulness into drowsy quiet. The shallow pools in the basin show only fragments of stars because grasses interrupt the surface. Each pool holds its own broken sky. You may notice how gentle fragmentation can be. The world does not have to be whole in one view. It can be held in pieces, repeated across many small waters, and still feel complete. The wetland understands this. We move along the basin edge, where the paperbark roots meet damp grass. The ground here is springy, not wet enough to be open water, not dry enough to feel hard. Such transitional ground may support plants that tolerate changing moisture, species adapted to being sometimes flooded and sometimes exposed. It is a patient place, neither one thing nor another, and that patience gives it life. The scent of grass is stronger here. It is fresher than the mud scent, but softened by dampness. There is also the faint woody smell of bark behind us, reminding us of the paperbark forest even while we look across the open basin. You breathe in, and the wetland offers all its layers at once: grass, mud, water, wood, flower, and night air. A small cluster of flowering wetland plants rises near one pool, their pale shapes barely visible. During the day, they may draw bees, flies, beetles, or birds depending on the species and season. At night, they become part of the basin's softness, their forms blurred, and their scent faint. You can sense them more than see them, which may be the gentlest way to know them. The Kakadu paperbark wetlands are full of plants whose beauty changes with the hour. Some are bright in sun, some luminous at dusk, some almost invisible at night except through scent or outline. The wetland does not keep beauty in one register. It lets beauty move through light, touch, smell, sound, and memory. Tonight, most of it has entered the slower senses. We pause where the grassy basin reflects a wider piece of sky. The stars are steady above, broken below by stems and small ripples. The air is still enough for you to hear distant water birds shifting somewhere beyond the basin, though their forms remain hidden. They are part of the night's calm population, resting, feeding, or simply waiting in the wetland's cover. Bird life in Kakadu's wetlands can be abundant, especially when water and food align through the seasons. Egrets, herons, ducks, geese, and many other birds may use these floodplains and lagoons, each following its own needs. But tonight we keep them soft, not as a catalogue, only as quiet presences at the edges of hearing. The wetland can hold many wings without waking the dark. A low rustle moves through the grass, then stops. The stems continue to sway for a moment after the cause is gone. You watch the delayed movement, the way the basin keeps a trace of what passed through. This, too, is restful. The world does not need to be frozen to be calm. It only needs movements that belong to the place. We step back toward the paperbarks, returning to the shade after the open basin. The trunks receive us with their pale stillness. The air under them is warmer, more woody, and quieter at the edges. It feels like entering a familiar room after standing under a wide sky. Both spaces are peaceful, but the forest gathers the senses closer. Under the trees, fallen leaves make soft layers over damp ground. Some leaves have curled into narrow shapes, while others lie flat and dark. Small fungi may appear in wetter seasons, feeding on the old plant matter, though tonight they remain unseen in the shadowed litter. Decomposition continues here with deep patience. It is one of the wetland's most faithful forms of work. You can feel how the ground is made by what the trees release. The canopy gives shade and leaves, the bark sheds, the flowers fall, the branches drop. The water slows everything down, and the soil receives it. Over time, the paperbark wetland builds a soft foundation from its own passing seasons. That is a quiet kind of self-renewal. The channel beside us is very narrow now, more of a dark seam between roots than an open path of water. It may widen again farther along, or it may fade into a damp hollow. We follow it as long as it remains visible, because even a small thread of water can guide the senses. Its faint shine is enough. In the Kakadu paperbark wetlands, small threads matter. A narrow channel can connect pools after rain. A shallow depression can hold moisture through dry weeks. A root shadow can shelter a young fish or insect. A fallen leaf can feed unseen life. The landscape is not only its broad lagoons and wide floodplains, it is also these minute continualities, each one quietly sustaining the whole. A gentle coolness rises from the narrow water, and you can imagine it flowing around your ankles like air rather than liquid. The sound is almost gone, but not entirely. Every now and then, water touches a root with a tiny tick, or a leaf shifts where it floats against the bank. The smallest sounds become audible when the night is patient enough. We stop beside a trunk whose bark hangs in many layers. The outer sheets curl away, revealing softer tones beneath grey, cream, pale tan, and a muted brown that has absorbed moisture. At the base, mud has darkened the bark almost black. Higher up, the trunk returns to its moon-like pallor. The tree holds a vertical record of wetness and air. You may feel drawn to the calm honesty of that record. The tree does not hide where water has touched it. It carries each condition in color and texture. In a wetland, this openness is everywhere. The land shows its waterlines, its dried edges, its soft patches, and its new growth. Nothing needs to be polished smooth. We continue past the trunk, and the narrow water disappears under leaf litter. For a while, we move through a patch of damp forest floor, where the wetland is present more as scent than surface. The mud smell remains, but hidden. The ground looks darker between pale bark strips. Frogs call from nearby pools we cannot see. The water has gone out of sight, but not out of hearing. This hidden water changes the feeling of the forest. It makes every shadow seem slightly deeper, every root more important, every dip in the ground more alive. You know that pools may be just beyond the next trunk, or beneath the grass, or connected by a film of moisture too thin to shine. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands continue beneath visibility, and that continuity is soothing. A soft flicker of light appears among the trees again, low and brief. Then another, farther away. The darkness between them remains broad and calm. Tiny lights in a wetland night can feel like thoughts appearing before sleep, small, gentle, and not demanding. They glow, fade, and leave the mind darker in a pleasant way. We follow no single light. We stay with the overall hush. The paperbarks stand around us, and the unseen pools continue to breathe through scent and sound. A warm breeze moves only through the upper leaves, leaving the lower air still. The canopy whispers while the ground remains quiet, creating a layered calm from roots to sky. The wetland's vertical layers are active even at night. Down in the mud, microbes and roots continue their slow work. At the water surface, insects move and gases exchange. Among stems and leaves, frogs call and small animals shelter. In the canopy, leaves release moisture and respond to air. Each layer has its own pace, and together they form the living stillness you feel around you. You can imagine your awareness settling through those layers. First the leaves above, then the pale trunks, then the dark spaces between roots, then the pools, the mud, and the hidden sediment below. The descent is not downward like falling. It is a soft settling through attention, deeper into the same place, the same calm, the same Kakadu night. Ahead, the sound of open water returns, broader than the narrow thread we left behind. We move toward it through the paperbarks, and the trunks begin to thin. A low lagoon reveals itself, larger than the hidden pools, but smaller than the broad floodplain water. It lies in a gentle hollow, with reeds at one end and open bank at the other. The lagoon's surface is dark and slightly rippled. Unlike the enclosed pool, it receives the breeze more easily, and its reflections are broken into long, soft fragments. The paperbark trunks along the margin appear as pale streaks rather than clear columns. You can hear the water moving here, not strongly, just enough to make the edge murmur against roots and reeds. We sit with that murmur for a while. It is one of the most sleepful sounds in the wetland, because it is irregular but gentle. Not a rush, not a crash, only a soft touch repeated with tiny variation. The mind can follow it without effort, then let it go. It continues whether you listen or drift. Lagoons and billabongs in this country often hold the memory of former channels, flood flows, and seasonal water movement. Some are connected strongly in wet times and isolated later. Their shapes are made by water's old paths and the land's low patience. In the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, such waters feel like pauses in the landscape, places where movement has widened enough to rest. This lagoon is one of those pauses. Reeds cluster at the shallow end, where sediment has gathered and plants have taken hold. The deeper center remains open, dark, and reflective. Along the bank, paperbark roots make rough curves that hold soil against slow erosion. Each part of the lagoon has a different role, and all of them share the same quiet water. A night breeze carries the scent of reeds across the lagoon. It is green, damp, and slightly sweet, mixed with the soft mineral smell of mud. You breathe it in slowly. The body does not need to know the names of the plants to be soothed by them. Their scent tells enough. Water is near, life is present, and the night is calm. Across the lagoon, a pale bird shape may stand at the edge, motionless and nearly indistinguishable from a reflection. We do not make a story of it. It is simply there. If the imagination sees it, part of the wetland's still company. Birds know how to stand in shallow water for a long time, and that stillness belongs perfectly to the mood of the place. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands teach stillness through many bodies. A tree stands in water. A bird stands at the edge. A frog waits under a leaf. A pool holds stars. A seed waits in damp soil. Stillness here is not emptiness or idleness. It is readiness, rest, shelter, and belonging, all held together without display. We move along the open bank, where the mud is smoother and less covered by leaf litter. The surface shines in patches, and shallow impressions collect tiny pools of starlight. At the edge, water laps softly and withdraws. You can imagine the mud cool under touch, dense and fine, shaped by both flood deposition and the delicate feet of passing creatures. Fine sediments settle when water slows, creating the smooth textures that make wetland margins feel so soft. Clay, silt, organic matter, and plant fragments mix into a living substrate. It can hold water, release nutrients, and preserve traces. The mud may look plain, but it is one of the wetland's great quiet makers, allowing roots, pools, and seasonal growth to return. A pale line of foam or plant film gathers in a slight curve near the bank. It marks where tiny surface movements have pushed floating material together. The line is delicate and uneven, a drawing made by water without intention. You watch it bend around a root, then disappear into shadow. Even the lagoon's surface has its own slow handwriting. We keep following the bank until the reeds grow thicker and the open water becomes harder to see. The sound changes from lapping to rustling as stems take over the edge. A frog calls very close, hidden somewhere in the dense growth. Its voice is full and soft, and because you cannot see it, the sound seems to come from the wetland itself. There is no need to find it. The hidden source is part of the calm. Many sounds at night are like that, present without being located, intimate without being visible. You can let them surround you, trusting the pattern rather than the details. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands continue to hold their life in layers, and we continue to move beside them with care. The reeds thin again, and a small side pool appears, connected to the lagoon by a narrow opening. The side pool is almost perfectly still. It reflects the paperbarks more clearly than the lagoon because the breeze does not reach it easily. One pale trunk appears twice, once in air and once in water, the two images meeting at the dark line of the bank. We pause at the side pool because it feels like a quieter echo of the lagoon. Open water becomes sheltered water, broken reflection becomes clear reflection, wider sound becomes close hush. The wetland offers these nested calm places, one inside another, so that the mind can keep settling. We do not have to choose the deepest quiet yet. We simply enter each softer layer as it appears. A small floating leaf rests near the reflected trunk. Its shape is dark, but its edge catches light. It drifts a little, then stops against the surface film. The reflection around it bends slightly, making the trunk seem to ripple at the leaf's touch. A small object alters a larger image, and the pool receives the alteration without resistance. This is another gentle pattern to carry. Small things matter, but they do not have to be loud. A leaf can change a reflection. A root can shape a bank. A pool can cool the air. A single slow breath can change the body's sense of night. In the Paperbark Wetlands, significance is quiet and widely shared. The side pool smells strongly of still water and wet leaves. It is a low, earthy smell, softened by the sweetness of nearby plants. If you were here in the physical place, you might feel the humidity collecting on your skin and hair, a fine dampness that makes the night feel close. In the narration, that closeness becomes a blanket of atmosphere, warm and breathable. We stay beside the side pool until the lagoon's wider murmur fades into the background. The smaller water becomes central. The pale trunk and its reflection become the main shapes in the world. Frogs continue at a distance, insects continue everywhere, and the hidden mud continues its long, patient changes below. The scene narrows and rest deepens. Then, slowly, we move again, passing the side pool and following the lagoon's outlet into another channel. This one is broader than the earlier thread, but still shaded by paperbarks. The water moves almost imperceptibly, guided by the slight slope of the land and the memory of flood paths. Along the margins, root mats and sedges make a woven edge. The channel's woven edge is thick with life. During the day, insects may gather there, birds may forage, and small fish may slip among submerged roots. At night, much of that activity becomes hidden, but the structure remains. You can see how the wetland makes shelter from complexity, not by closing things off, but by offering many small spaces within the larger flow. We drift beside that flow, though we remain on land in the softness of the script. The water's direction is gentle enough that fallen leaves seem almost undecided. They turn, pause, and turn again, moving only when the current finds them. You may feel yourself becoming similarly unforced, carried by the quiet without needing to decide anything. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands extend around us in all directions now, not as a map, but as a feeling of repeated water and pale trunks. If you looked back, you would see darkness layered with the places we have passed: lagoon, basin, hidden pool, reed edge, grassy meadow, and enclosed channel. But we do not look back for long. The next quiet curve is enough. A faint glow lies ahead where the channel opens under a gap in the canopy. It is not dawn, only starlight gathered more freely where the trees have parted. The water there appears smoother and broader. The air seems slightly cooler, and the frog calls spread out again. We move toward the glow with the same slow attention, letting the channel carry our sense of direction. At the opening, the channel widens into a shallow sheet of water under scattered paperbarks. The trees stand like pale islands, each with a dark reflection pooled around its base. Between them, grasses emerge in patches, and floating plants gather where the water slows. The place feels neither forest nor open floodplain, but a gentle mixture of both. This mixture is typical of wetlands shaped by seasonal water. Boundaries blur because water itself blurs them. A tree can stand in what looks like a pond. Grass can grow in what becomes open water. A dry patch can become a channel when rain returns. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are not arranged in firm categories, and that looseness makes them feel deeply alive. We step into the feeling of that looseness. The mind no longer needs precise edges. It can accept tree water, grass water, sky water, and mud water as blended forms. The whole landscape becomes a slow gradient, moving from one condition to another without rupture. It is easy to breathe here, because nothing asks for sharp division. A pale insect flickers above the shallow sheet, then vanishes among the trunks. A second ripple spreads from the base of a grass clump. A frog calls from the far side, answered by one behind us. Each small event appears in the larger calm like a thread in cloth. The cloth does not tear, it only grows more richly woven. The water in this shallow sheet may warm quickly during the day, encouraging plant growth and insect activity, then cool at night under the open sky. Temperature shifts like these influence oxygen, movement, and feeding. Yet from where we stand, the science is felt simply as warm memory rising from water and cool starlight settling onto it. The wetland makes processes sensory. You can let those sensations continue working without words. Warmth below, coolness above, soft mud, pale trunks, dark reflections, a steady hum of life. The voice remains with you, but the place itself begins to do more of the carrying. We move between the scattered trees, careful and slow, as if walking through a dream of shallow water. One paperbark stands alone in the sheet, its trunk splitting into two main stems a little above the waterline. The split creates a dark V of shadow, and strips of bark hang from both stems. The reflection below doubles the shape, making a pale hourglass across the surface. We pause there, letting the form settle into the mind. The tree has grown in response to light, space, water, and perhaps old damage now healed into form. Its shape is not perfect in a formal way, but it is perfectly itself. Wetland trees often carry the record of adaptation in their bodies, bending, forking, shedding, and renewing according to conditions. Their beauty comes from having lived with the place rather than apart from it. We move past the split trunk, and the shallow water darkens under denser leaves. The channel reforms on the other side, narrower but clearer, leading toward another stand of paperbarks. The repetition is hypnotic now. Open water, tree island, shaded channel, reed edge, pool, again and again, softly altered, always belonging to the same quiet landscape. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are guiding us deeper into their pattern, though not toward any final point. The journey is continuous, like following a song that circles through familiar notes. You may hear some phrases clearly and let others blur. That is all right. The wetland remains steady underneath the words, and the words remain steady inside the wetland. A light mist begins to gather very low over the water, or perhaps the humid air simply thickens near the surface. It softens the bases of the trunks and makes the reflections less precise. The mist smells of wet grass and warm mud. It does not hide the landscape completely, it only makes the edges kinder. Mist often forms when cooling air meets moisture near the ground, especially where water has stored warmth through the day. In a wetland, this can happen in small pockets, not always as a wide fog, but as a local softening of the air. You can feel it as a veil laid gently over the shallow pools, making the night quieter than before. We move through the softened air, and the trees seem to appear slightly later than expected, emerging as pale shapes only when we are near. The effect slows the mind even more. You cannot look far ahead, so you rest in the near world. The next trunk, the next ripple, the next curve of reed, the next warm breath of damp ground. This nearness is comforting. It is how sleep often approaches, reducing the wide day to simple impressions. A pillow, a sheet, a voice, a breath, a dark room. Here, the wetland gives its own version. Bark, water, reed, scent, frog. We accept the smaller circle and let it be complete. The channel bends around a mound of roots and old leaf litter. The mound rises only a little above the surrounding wet ground, but it supports a cluster of young plants. Their leaves are dark and glossy with moisture. Around the mound, water slides through narrow gaps, carrying tiny fragments of plant matter. The mound is a small island of continuity inside the wetness. Such raised root mats can create microhabitats, places where different plants establish, and where small creatures can move above the waterline. Over time, roots, litter, sediment, and living stems build upon one another. The wetland structure is not only carved by water, it is also grown. You can see that here in miniature, a low island made by life holding itself together. We pass the mound and enter another pool-shadowed hollow. The water is close, the trees close, and the mist close. A frog call comes from so near that it seems to vibrate in the damp air beside us. Then silence expands around it. You breathe out, and the hollow receives that imagined breath as gently as it receives everything else. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands keep receiving the night. They receive the falling leaves, the cooling air, the small calls, the drifting mist, and the faint starlight between branches. They receive our attention too, not as something that changes them, but as something that can rest there for a while. We are not taking from the place. We are listening with it. The hollow leads to a narrow passage where two paperbark trunks lean toward each other across the water. Their crowns do not quite touch, but their reflections meet below, completing the arch in darkness. We move beneath the space between them. The air there feels suspended, held by the two trees and the quiet channel passing under them. An arch like this can feel ceremonial, but in the wetland, it is simply growth responding to conditions. Trees lean toward light, roots adjust to soft ground, water shakes margins, and reflections complete forms the land did not intend. Beauty arrives as a side effect of belonging. You can rest in that because it asks nothing elaborate from the world. Beyond the leaning trunks, the channel opens again, but the mist makes the opening soft and pale near the water. The scattered stars above are still sharp, while the reflections below are blurred. Above and below no longer mirror each other exactly. The wetland has become more dreamlike, and our movement with it becomes slower still. We follow the blurred reflections, letting them guide us through the shallow opening. A reed bed stands to the right, dense and dark. Paperbarks stand to the left, pale and widely spaced. The channel runs between them, neither choosing tree nor reed, simply accepting both banks. The water's acceptance is part of its grace. You may feel that same grace in the act of listening. You do not need to choose between staying awake and falling asleep. You can be between them for as long as you need. The script will keep moving, the wetland will keep breathing, and the paperbarks of Kakadu will remain in the night, pale and patient beside the water. A long, low sound comes from far across the wetland, softened by distance and vegetation. It is impossible to place exactly. The sound fades gradually, and the insect hum fills in behind it. Nothing follows sharply. The night remains intact. In a landscape this layered, distant sounds can arrive like memories, briefly present, then absorbed by the wider hush. We do not pursue it. We stay with the channel and the near reeds. Drops of moisture gather along reed blades and fall at irregular intervals into the water below. Each drop makes a tiny ring that expands until it meets another ring, or a stem, or the bank. The rings do not travel far, but for a few seconds they shape the surface. In those rings, you can see the wetland's patience again. A small event is allowed to widen until it naturally fades. No one stops it, no one forces it to continue. It simply completes its own movement. The mind can learn from that without trying. Let each inner ripple widen, soften, and disappear into the dark water of rest. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands have been with us for a long stretch now, and still they have more quiet to offer. That is the nature of such places. They do not exhaust themselves in a single view. A wetland changes with every turn of the bank, every rise of ground, every breath of wind, every hour of the night. We continue, and it continues. The channel grows very shallow, its surface broken by mud ridges and plant stems. Water gleams in the spaces between them, making a pattern like dark glass set among soft earth. The mud ridges may have formed through settling sediment, root growth, and the slow rearrangement of water after floods. They are low, humble features, but they guide flow and shelter life. You can imagine small creatures moving through the tiny channels between ridges, finding moisture where it remains, and cover where stems lean over. At this scale, the wetland is a labyrinth, but not a threatening one. It is a sheltering complexity, full of roots suited to bodies much smaller than ours. We pass beside it with gentle respect. A faint sweetness returns in the air, stronger than before, suggesting blossoms somewhere close. The smell drifts in and out, mingling with damp bark and mud. You may not see the flowers, but the scent makes them present. It is restful to know that not all beauty needs to be seen, and in the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands, scent often carries what darkness hides. The paperbarks ahead appear as pale vertical strokes in the mist. Their leaves are mostly still, and their reflections are indistinct. The ground between them looks soft, dark, and layered. We move slowly into that stand, and the wider wetland falls behind us again. Each transition is gradual, each new enclosure a little quieter than the last. Within the stand, the insect hum becomes lower, perhaps because the vegetation absorbs the higher edges of sound. Frog calls are fewer here, more spaced. The air feels close and warm again, with moisture touching every surface. A drop falls from a leaf to the litter below, not into water this time, making a soft, almost dry sound. The variation is small but clear. We are in a part of the wetland where water is present in the ground more than on the surface. Pools lie nearby, but the forest floor itself holds dampness under bark strips and leaves. This hidden moisture keeps the place alive between larger floods. It softens decay, cools roots, and gives small organisms a refuge from dryness. The wetland breathes even when water is not shining openly. You can feel the reassurance of hidden reserves. Not everything sustaining life is visible at every moment. Moisture can remain below leaves. Seeds can wait in soil. Roots can hold through dry days. Calm can remain beneath thought. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands show this without speaking. Through damp ground in the dark, we pause where three trunks grow close together, their bases almost touching. The space between them is filled with old leaves and shadow. Higher up, the trunks separate and lean slightly away from one another, opening toward the canopy. Their bark layers catch the faint light differently, so each trunk has a separate tone. Together, they feel like a quiet chord. A chord is made by difference held together. These trees are not identical, yet their forms belong in the same wetland music. The water, reeds, frogs, mud, insects, flowers, grasses, and stars are different too. But tonight, they make one calm sound. You can rest inside that harmony without needing to hear it as music exactly. Beyond the three trunks, a shallow pool lies almost hidden under fallen branches. The branches are old, dark, and partly submerged, with softened edges where water has worked on them. They make a lattice across the pool, and leaves have collected against them. Small, open patches of water show between the wood, reflecting bits of sky and bark. Fallen wood in wetlands becomes habitat in its own right. It slows flow, catches organic matter, provides perches, shelters small aquatic life, and gradually breaks down into the system. The branch is no longer only part of a tree, but part of the pool's structure. In a wetland, identity loosens gracefully. A tree can become shade, then wood, then shelter, then soil. We look at the branch lattice and let that loosening soften the mind. Things do not have to remain fixed to remain meaningful. A form can change, and its usefulness can continue in another way. The wetland is full of such continuations. It is one reason the darkness here feels kind, because even what is hidden or changing is still held within the whole. A small ripple moves beneath the branches, bending the reflected stars into wavering lines. Perhaps something passed under the wood, or perhaps a drop fell from above. The pool keeps the cause to itself. We watch the effect travel among the branch shadows, then fade. The surface returns to stillness, darker than before because your eyes have softened. The path of attention now follows the fallen branch to its thicker end, where it rests against a paperbark trunk. The living tree and fallen wood touch gently there, separated by time but joined in the same wet place. The living bark is pale and layered. The fallen wood is dark, wet, and smooth. Together they show two stages of the forest's long breathing. We continue past them, and the ground slopes down toward another glimmer of water. The sound of frogs grows fuller again, and the mist thins slightly, revealing a wider pool ahead. This pool lies under an opening in the canopy, and the stars above it are clear. The paperbarks form a rough circle around it, and the water at the center is smooth enough to look very deep. Whether it is truly deep matters less than how it holds the night. The pool gathers darkness in a way that makes the surrounding trunks seem brighter. It gathers sound, too, reflecting frog calls and soft leaf movement back toward the bank. You can feel the pool as a calm center, not dramatic, not empty, simply open and receptive. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands often arrange themselves around such centers. A pool becomes a focus for roots, reeds, insects, birds, and reflected sky. It draws attention because water draws life, yet it remains quiet, holding everything without display. We stand at its edge and let the calm center steady the whole journey for a while. A few floating flowers or fallen petals rest near the surface, pale and widely spaced. They may have drifted from nearby plants, carried by a small current or released by the night breeze. Their forms are too dim to identify clearly, but their presence lightens the dark water. Each petal looks like a small, soft thought resting before it sinks. The water will eventually take them in. They may soften, darken, and join the organic matter below. For now, they float in the star reflection, held between brightness and sediment. You can let your own thoughts float like that, without pushing them away and without holding them up. The pool knows how to receive them when they are ready. We remain beside the pool as the surrounding chorus settles into a steady layer. The frogs are no longer separate events but part of the atmosphere. The insects are a fine, continuous veil. The leaves move only sometimes. The water shifts at long intervals. The paperbarks stand through it all, pale and rooted, accepting the night as it deepens. A faint path of open ground leads away from the pool toward another darker line of trees. We take it slowly, leaving the petals, the stars, and the calm center behind, though they remain in the atmosphere of the script. The ground is soft with leaf litter, and the scent of bark rises again. Water sounds become quieter for a while, replaced by the low rustle of dry layers over damp soil. This interval away from open water reminds you that the wetland is not only the visible pools, it is also the ground between them, the slightly raised patches, the roots that cross from wet to less wet, and the organisms that move through both. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands are continuous through these transitions. Water's presence may become subtle, but the whole place still belongs to it. We walk through the tree line, and the trunks appear and pass slowly on either side. The pale bark makes the passage feel gently lit from within. Some trees are marked by dark streaks where water has run down the surface. Others show curls of bark lifted by age and weather. You can look at any one of them and feel time layered into texture. Time in the wetland is not a straight road. It is seasonal, circular, layered, and returning. Flood time, flowering time, drying time, cool night, warm dawn, seed time, decay time. Many times overlap in a single tree, a single pool, a single patch of mud. Tonight's darkness is only one layer, but it is a generous one because it lets the others rest inside it. A soft glow appears ahead at ground level, which resolves into starlight on water as we draw closer. Another pool waits beyond the trees, elongated and narrow, with reeds along one side and paperbark roots along the other. The surface is broken by tiny ripples moving lengthwise. This pool feels like a corridor, as if water has paused while still remembering direction. We follow its length, the reeds whisper on the left, and the roots hold the bank on the right. The pool is not wide, so every sound feels close. A small fish might disturb the surface near the reeds, and the ripple reaches the root bank in seconds. The wetland becomes intimate again, scaled to the distance of a breath. Narrow pools can be important connectors, especially when water levels allow movement between larger bodies. They are also edges, rich with shelter and feeding opportunities. Here, the narrowness concentrates the meeting of plant, mud, water, and air. You can feel the life of the place gathered into a small, elongated space, quiet but deeply occupied. The pool's far end curves out of sight. We do not rush to see where it goes. The curve itself is enough, a promise of continuation without demand. The paperbarks lean over it in places, and their reflections cross the water like pale, wavering bridges. We move beside those reflections, not needing to cross, only to remain near the calm they make. The Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands continue to unfold in this way, one soft curve after another. There is no single climax hidden ahead, no event the night is building toward. The richness lies in ongoing presence, in the steady return of water and tree, scent and sound, open space and enclosure. That ongoingness is what makes the place fit so naturally with sleep. A warm patch of air rises from a sheltered part of the bank, carrying a stronger scent of decomposing leaves. Then, a cooler patch arrives from the water. The two mix around you, and the difference disappears. The body may notice such changes without naming them, just as it notices the comfort of a room cooling slowly after sunset. Sensation becomes a quiet guide. At the bend, the pool widens slightly, and a small stand of aquatic plants fills the center. Their stems are thin, their leaves dark, and their reflections tangled. Around them, the water forms a narrow ring of open surface. It looks like a small garden planted by depth and chance. We pause at its edge, letting the tangled shapes slow the eyes. Aquatic plants create oxygen, shelter, shade, and food within wetland pools. They also slow water and capture fine particles, helping the pool become clearer or more complex depending on season and conditions. Their stems may look fragile, but together they shape the inner life of the water. The wetland's softness is often made from many delicate things acting together. You can sense that collective delicacy around the plant stand. One stem alone would be slight. Many stems together create habitat. One frog call is small. Many calls make the night. One paperbark is beautiful. Many make the wetlands pale forest. One sentence is only a breath. Many can carry you deeper into rest. We let the plant stand recede behind us and continue along the pool. The reeds lower, the roots thicken, and the water grows darker beneath overhanging leaves. The curve brings us into shade so complete that the surface nearly disappears. Only the faint sound of lapping remains. For a while, we navigate by hearing scent and the remembered shape of the bank. There is a special calm in not seeing everything. The imagination fills gently, not with alarm, but with trust in the pattern already established. You know the paperbarks are there because their scent and pale shapes return. You know the water is there because it cools the air and murmurs at the edge. You know the wetland continues because every sense agrees. The pool finally opens again into a small clearing of water under starlight. We step into the softer visibility with no abrupt change, just a gradual lifting of darkness. The water brightens by a shade, the trunks become clearer, the reeds separate into individual stems. The scene returns, not suddenly, but like a thought remembered peacefully after drifting. This gentle return is part of the sleep journey too. You may drift away and come back to the voice, and when you do, the Kakadu Paperbark Wetlands will still be here. The same warm air, the same dark water, the same pale trees will receive you. Nothing will have leapt ahead. The place is patient enough for waking and sleeping to mingle. A few small ripples cross the clearing pool from the far side. They arrive at different angles, overlap, and make a delicate pattern that lasts only a moment. The reflected stars break into little trembling pieces. Then the surface smooths, and the stars gather again. The pool is always losing and remaking its image of the sky. We stand with that remaking and let it be quiet. Above us, the real stars remain distant and steady. Below us, the reflected stars are near and changeable. Both belong to the experience of the pool. The wetland gives you steadiness and change together, one overhead, one at your feet, both held in the same night. The clearing narrows into yet another shaded channel, and the water leads us onward among the paperbarks. The trunks are waiting in their pale silence, the roots holding the bank, the leaves breathing softly above. We follow the first dark curve, then the next, with no need to name how far we have come, as the wetland continues opening quietly ahead.